Hello world, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm going to be building the Gumroad website in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I know this is a bit of a segue from my usual Webflow rebuilds, but I just want to try something out with code, and this is how it turned out. Now, this sort of rebuild is meant for people who already have some experience with sort of code and building things with HTML and CSS, because there are some things that I sort of brush over with in the course, only because, well, this website is a little bit advanced. Now, a lot of these sections, as you can see on this website, are reused, right? So we have, like, this section here that looks pretty similar to this one in terms of, like, structure, and then if we scroll farther down here, this one looks pretty similar to this one, and so on. So you might think it's easy, but there's actually a lot of complex code that goes on inside of it, and especially right here we have a parallax interaction like this with these stickers, so if you guys can see that, like that. And then we also have this looping text interaction with this text, all making it a little bit more advanced. And so that's why I feel like for this sort of rebuild, you need to have a little bit of prerequisites, and some of those prerequisites are having worked with HTML and CSS beforehand, sort of knowing Flexbox and Grid in CSS pretty well, and you've also worked maybe a little bit with CSS animations, so like keyframing and stuff like that, and then also just some basic JavaScript, so add event listener, document.query selector, stuff like that, like basic stuff, and like if loops, for loops, things like that. Now, I know this isn't a sort of video that's geared necessarily towards beginners, but yeah, this is sort of like a stepping stone to become, like transition from a beginner to somebody who's more advanced. And I think the sort of repeated nature of the Gumroad website also makes it easier for you to go from beginner to advanced, only because a lot of sort of really popular websites don't have new interactions and new animations and like a new sort of structure for every single section, right? Like there's some repeatedness, and I think this website is really good at showcasing that. It also, in this sort of build, I wanted to stress like using classes that you can reuse over and over again. So for example, like if I name something heading 1, or for example, for this right here would be our hero, right? Because it's the first thing that we see, it's our main section. Now, here I wouldn't name this text hero heading, right? That wouldn't be the class I give it, only because I could use something like this, you know, like it's a heading and I could use it later on in my website. Maybe, for example, like over here, this could also be a heading 1. So I think that's something that I really tried to stress throughout this video. I wanted to use reusable classes and sort of make it an easier build experience and not repeat code so much, just so that we could sort of skip through some of the other parts. Now, the next thing that I really want to get to is sort of going through the entire page and explaining to you what's going on. Okay, so first up, we have this sort of navbar over here, right? It has some links and some buttons, right? There's also this sort of next section that we're going to see again pretty often throughout this website. It has a button and these nice stickers that, as you sort of scroll, have this parallax animation going on. And this is one of the most important parts of this course. I think parallax animation is something that's very trendy right now, and it also looks, or trendy in web design, and it also looks really cool. So that's one thing. Then we have this looping infinite marquee sort of text going on. Now, in this, I also used a lottie animation. That's what this is right here. And for that, I used a special sort of package from lottie files, and that's also sort of interesting to look at. So I mentioned that in here too. Then, as you can see, here's where the reusability sort of starts to come in, like this repeated sort of grids, and then here we have this text that again we sort of keep reusing, and then that parallax animation comes back, and then as we sort of keep scrolling, it's a visually nice looking website, and it uses the sort of design trend that's going on right now of neo-brutalism. Now, neo-brutalism is something that's really common right now. I think it's more like bold typography and bold colors, and that's something that's sort of represented in this website really well. So Yes. Now here we have again that parallax effect, as well as some more over here, and then we finally come down to our footer down here. Okay? Now, another really good part about this website is the fact that it is responsive. So let me just scroll back up, and I will show it to you guys in its responsive mode fully. Okay, so let's just switch to tablet, and as you can see, when it switches to tablet, we get this nice responsive navbar that I'll show you guys in a second, and the grid goes from being split, sort of like splitting the screen in 50/50s, to taking up the sort of racks to the next row like this. We still have our parallax animation, and this sort of section expands to take up the whole screen, and then so on. Like we see this again throughout our entire website, and it looks amazing, just as well in tablet mode as it did in laptop. Now let me open up this nav bar so you can see what's going on. So we have a couple of links here, and the nav bar closes up, and it has a nice sort of cross interaction that you're seeing right there. Okay. So now let me just switch back. Okay. So that's really it for the demo of the website. Yeah, now I sort of wanted to show you guys, in the description down below, I have linked sort of starter files that have some basic code already written into them, and I'll just going to explore those right now. Okay, so in our HTML, we just have a basic script, and it's just linking to our CSS file here, and I also have a script that's linking to the sort of package, the lottie files package that allows us to use the lottie player, okay? And then we are also linking to that home.js file. That's pretty much all there is inside of this HTML. Now in our CSS, there's a little bit more. Let me just close that out. First, I'm importing this font from Google Fonts. And then in here, I'm using CSS variables to define all these different variables. Okay, so I have black, white, teal, pink, yellow, and neon, and I thought this would be, first of all, again, going from beginner to advanced, just using something like CSS variables to make it easier for you as you sort of use these, right? Because you don't have to like sort of look up the hex code every time. You already have this variable sort of set up. And I also thought it would be, yeah, it would be easier than having to sort of show you guys the hex code every time and have you paste it in. I think this way you already have these, and it's just the letters or the words to identify them by. And then after that, I have some default styles. Now, whenever I start a new sort of project, I always like to get rid of all the default styles that our browsers may be giving us. And one of those things is the margin, and then we have the padding, and then we have the border, and then I like to set the box sizing to border box. The last thing that I did here that was sort of custom to here was adding that font family of the font that I imported in here, and then defaulting to the sans serif if we switched. And then finally I have, I'm selecting my body tag here, and I'm setting the font size to be 18 pixels. And that won't make too much sense unless you watch the video, but basically what I'm doing here is I'm trying to also emphasize the use of responsive typography, so using things like EMs, REMs or REMs, and not using pixels so much, only because they are sort of static values. So I get sort of more detail into that as the video goes on, but that's what that's there for. And then in our JavaScript file, I have nothing in here, mainly because I explained everything that that you need to add in here, so yeah, I didn't really feel like I need to add anything in here. Okay, well, that's really it for the intro section for this project. Now I'm going to let myself take it and explain to you how to make the hero section. Okay, now let's get started actually building. So the first section that I want to tackle is the hero section, and I'll do the navbar section next, but I just wanted to do the hero section first. So we'll do this one now. Now, as you can see, we have sort of that parallax effect going on with the hero section, but with these sort of stickers right here. But I'm going to stick the parallax and the sort of looping text interaction, any interaction, to go all the way at the end, and not right now. Now, let's get started building. So
first thing that I'm going to do is going to switch back to my VS Code here. And really, what I want to do now is actually get started building, right? And for us to be able to sort of see our changes in real time, I have an extension installed called Live Server. Now what Live Server does is, as you can see, I already have it installed. What this does is, if I type in, for example, hello world into here, and I hit save, right, and I open it up with Live Server, as you can see, it's opened up, and here it says hello world, but now maybe I want to say something else. Maybe I want to say hello universe, right? And as soon as I hit save, if I switch back to my thing, if I switch back to my Google Chrome tab right here, it switched to hello universe. It just allows us to see our changes in real time, and we're able to design while also simultaneously looking at our project. So that's what Live Server is for. Okay, once you guys have that extension installed, you just have to right click and hit open with Live Server, and that should get you started. Okay, now let me get rid of this and let's get started actually building. So I'm going to take reference again from here, and okay. So the first thing that I want to sort of build, or just start before I even start building, is I'm going to comment, and I'm adding this comment so that it's easier for me later to figure out what these sections actually are. So for commenting in VS Code, all you have to do is hit Control K and then Control C. So if you hit Control K and then C without taking your hand off of the Control key, then it should work. That's how you comment, so Control K, C. Then I'm going to type in hero, so this is a hero section. That's just a comment. It doesn't actually affect anything, it's just to make our code look a little bit cleaner and to overall just make it easier for us later when we want to change things and make it easier for us to find things. So there, hero section. Now, the first thing that I want to do is, as if you guys noticed, as we keep scrolling through our website right here, this sort of grid with two halves, two columns, like this one here and then this one here, is very common across this website. So on the left we have one column, and on the right we have one column, right? And then if we keep scrolling, you see the same thing happens here, and the same thing happens here, so one column here, one column here. And actually even this thing is just one column here and one column here. You just can't see that because there's no line in between. But this is also using that sort of grid of halves, right? So this one here, this one here. So basically this whole page is just tons of grids, right? And so to make this easier on us and make it be more efficient with our building, we're going to use a class that we can reuse over and over again. So I'm going to give this sort of like this hero section a class of maybe grid halves, right? And then this will have the same styling, the same classes as sort of like this class right here. I'm going to give this a class of grid halves, okay? So grid halves is going to be able to make it easier for us to use it later on too, right? Because we can sort of reuse the same thing of having two halves in a grid over and over again. So I'm going to just make a div, and to sort of make it easier and not spend so much time typing in div and then, you know, adding a class attribute here, what really sort of speeds up my workflow is hitting dot. Okay, so as you can see here, it comes up as emit abbreviation. So what this is doing is, if we just add a dot and then type in our class name, like grid halves, it creates a div with that sort of class of halves. And if I wanted to maybe make an image that also had a class, so I'd do image, and then I'd hit dot, and then I type in image, so that's my class. So it makes an image element with that class. This is a neat trick I learned recently, and it's really helpful, so it saves a lot of time. So again, I'm just going to this out, so dot grid halves. Okay, now I'm going to open up this div here, and we have our first class. Now another thing that if you guys notice as we sort of keep scrolling is this div has a background color of pink, right? And if we keep scrolling, this div also has a background color of pink, this one as well, right? All these sections have similar background colors, you know? Pink here, right? And then we also have teal, so teal here, white. So all these sort of classes of, okay, there's white here, there's yellow here. I think we saw yellow up here too, right? So yellow, black, all these sort of classes of this background colors are being reused repeatedly. So how we can sort of incorporate that into our design is make a bunch of background classes. So I'll make another div, so dot bg dash pink. Okay? Now, what this is going to mean is if we switch back to our home.css, right? In here, I'm going to just make a class. Okay, so .bg pink. Now, this will make a little bit more sense when we get into our CSS, but let me just finish our whole structure and then we can go into there. So .bg dash pink, right? Now, inside of here, another class that we're going to add is a class of padding. Now, I know there's a lot of reusing here, but trust me, it'll make it so much easier for us as we go on. So our padding class, again, if you look, if we inspect this sort of same thing right here, let me get rid of this mobile mode. So if we inspect this div, as you can see, if we hover into here, this has this padding class, and this padding class has a padding of 4.5 EM, right? I'll get into EM in just a second, but yeah, this has some padding, right? And this div also has that same padding class, and it has the same padding. So things are very uniform across this web page. This applies to this one right here, padding, padding. So this is really great because this makes it easier for us to build. So let's add another padding class. So .bg-pink.padding. Okay. Now you might be wondering, why don't we just add the padding to the actual background class, right? So like bg-pink can have the background, can have the padding, right? Well, that's because if we scroll down further here, like for example for this image right here, there's no padding here, right? So just for us to be able to, again, be more reusable with our classes. Okay, so let's go back to here. So it has a padding, right? And then, let's see, what's on this page? So we have a heading 1, right? So for that, again, heading 1, again, we hit dot, and then I'm going to give it a class of heading 1. Again, for reusability, I'm not saying something like hero heading, I'm saying something like heading 1, so that in the future, if I want to reuse that heading 1 class, I definitely can. Okay, and then here we have a paragraph element. So let me just close that out. So paragraph element, or I can keep that open. Okay, sorry. So here we have a paragraph element, so I'll add that one too. Actually, let me just copy this heading text into here. Oh, where's that go? Sorry, I undo. There we go. Okay, so go from 0 to $1, right? Then here for our paragraph, I'll do the exact same thing. So p.paragraph-1, and I'm just going to copy this and add an alt text. Okay. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is make this button right here, right? So in our same div class, I'm just going to add a button, and I'll give the class too of, let's see, button primary. So this is one of our main buttons. This is just going to say start selling. Okay, so that's all we need for this pink part of our grid. Now let's build this yellow part. Okay, so I'll close out this, or just minimize this bg-pink. And I'll make another class called bg-yellow. Okay, so inside of here, again, same idea, so padding. To have that dot, so padding, right? Now, things start to get a little bit different here, because we have images here, and then we have these stickers here, right? And how these stickers are working is, if we click on them and we check them out, these stickers are positioned absolutely. And that means that they are not relative to some of the other elements right here. And what that means is that basically they're floating on top of this image at the bottom. And how we're going to get that to work is by adding yet another class called relative. Now what this relative class does is it's just going to be a class that has the styles of position relative, okay? If we click back here, as you can see, it just has the style of position relative, and it's set to flex, okay? So it has that class of position relative so that this image right here, this background image, is able to take up the full width of that and remain as the sort of center of that page. And then these stickers that we have here are able to be positioned on top of that other image. So that's what we need the relative class for. Again, we're going to be reusing this a lot. So for example, right here, here, and so on and so on. So let's add a relative class, okay? Now inside of this relative class, I'm going to add our very first image. And this image is going to have a class of grid image, okay? So for our source here, I'm just going to go / resources, right? And I don't remember what this is called. Okay, wait. Hero profile.png. So that is this image in the background. And then we have the image that these stickers, right? So we're going to add another class, and this I'm going to call grid sticker. Okay, so that's the class it has. And the source of this is going to be, let's see, resources, right? And I think this is called hero sticker -1. Okay, now I'm just going to copy and paste this line, and I'm going to change this to grid sticker 2. Okay, sorry, hero sticker 2. So now if we look back at our page, well, this looks nothing like what we were just looking at, but we'll fix it, okay, so let's get started with the actual styling now. So I'm here in my CSS now, and to even make this a little bit, okay, so there. Now I'm going to make another comment here, and like I mentioned before, it's just Control K and then C, and this comment is going to signify all our sort of reusable classes, okay? So I'm going to have one for headings, okay? And the reason is we're going to have a lot more headings in the future. It's not just going to be like heading 1, we're going to have, I think this is a heading 3, we're going to have heading 2s, etc., etc. So I'm going to make a sort of comment for that, just so that, again, when we're organized, that's all comments are there for. So this is going to have a class of heading -1, like we saw it there, okay? And for heading 1, we'll come back to it in just a moment, but I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to make this one be for paragraphs. This is going to say paragraph 1, okay? Again, we'll have more paragraphs as we sort of go on, but yes. Now, okay, we'll also need one for buttons, because as you can see, we have one button, so I think it's called button primary. So we're going to use that one. And then finally, we're going to have one section for grids. So this is all our grid related stuff. Okay, so this has a couple classes in it. So this is going to have grid halves. Okay, and then let me switch back to my HTML here. We're going to have padding. Okay, or actually, okay, so we're going to need grid image, right? So grid image. Then we're going to need grid sticker. Okay, so here are some of the grid classes, and then I will make one more for other reusable code. So other reusable code. Okay, so this is going to contain stuff like, what do I see here? Okay, so the backgrounds, right? So BG pink. Or this might need some of its own section, actually. So this is going to be called BG, because we need one for BG pink, we need one for, we have a couple more backgrounds, right? Yeah, yellow, black, white, etc., etc. But for now, we're just going to have pink and yellow, because it's going to say yellow. And then we have padding and relative, so those are so other reusable code. So this is just going to say stuff like padding and relative. Okay, so now let's go through and sort of fill all these like all these sort of selectors out. Okay, let's just save it.
And okay, let's get started with the heading. Now, another sign. Now, as I've mentioned before, now this sort of video is for people who are trying to go from beginners in HTML to a little bit more advanced. And one of the signs of an advanced web developer is not using pixels for your font sizes, okay? And the reason for that is because using pixels are hard-coded values. So pixels don't change based on really anything. Like 18 pixels is always going to be 18 pixels regardless of whether it's on mobile, tablet, laptops, or like a really big monitor, right? And we don't want that to happen. We want sort of the font sizes to change based on screen size, right? And the way we can sort of do that is by using different sorts of font sizes. So have all different kinds of unit sizes, like I was saying before. And here is a sort of blog post that really helped me figure out which ones to use. So this is by Dave Redfern, right? I'll link this blog in the description down below. But this one sort of helped me figure out when to use which units in CSS. So there's pixels, there's percentages, there's EMs, rems, VH and VW, and unitless, okay? And so these are some of the main, or all of the sort of unit sizes. Now, some of them you use more than others, and I really try to stick away from pixels because, again, they're not good for responsive things, and there's just better things to use nowadays, okay? So we have percentages, okay? And we have, so what we're going to be using the most for font sizes, at least in this whole sort of video, is we're going to be using EMs, and we're going to be using rems in certain places. We're going to be using VH and VW, and unitless, okay? So these are the main things that we're going to sort of be using. I don't think we use percentages too much, and we don't use pixels a lot, but again, I'm going to link this blog down in the description below, and it'll explain better than I can on when to use which units, okay? So again, we're going to be using EMs, and that's because we can EMs sort of take into consideration other sort of elements around them, and it does it in relative to that, and that makes it really easy for it to scale and look better on all different sort of device widths, okay? So for our heading, I'm going to be using a font size of 5 EM, okay? And I'm also going to be giving it a line height of 1.1. Now, as you can see, there's no unit after this, right? So there's no EM, there's no VH, there's no VW, there's no REM, so what is this, right? Well, this is actually unitless, okay? So if we go back here, unitless. Now, unitless is great for line heights, because what this is calculating essentially is it's taking, so it's taking this 1.1 that I specified here, and it's multiplying it by the font size, okay? So you're basically getting, so what's basically happening is you're taking 1.1 and you're multiplying it by 5 EM, okay? So what this does is it's making our line height 5.5 EM. So that way we don't have to worry about always having to change the line heights based on the font size. So this just makes it easier for us in the long run because we don't have to worry about the line height because it's automatically in sort of dynamic position with the font size. If I made the line height 1, then it would be 5 EM. If I made the line height 2, then it'd be 10 EM, right? But I want to keep it at 1.1, so it's just a little bit more than 1. Okay, so that's our line height. Now, moving on to our paragraphs. Now, for our paragraphs, again, similar principle. Okay, so I'm changing the font size to be 1.5 EM, so it's smaller than the heading 1, obviously. And then I'm changing the line height to be 1.3. Okay? So now again, this would be 1.3 times 1.5. That's how you calculate it. Okay? Then I'm going to give it some margin, and I'm going to give it margin at the top, but none at the left and the right. So what this is saying is that it's giving 2 rem of margin to
to the top and to the bottom, and 0 to the left and to the right. Okay. Next up, we have our buttons. So for our buttons, I'm going to first start off by, let me save and let's see where we are right now. Okay, so already it's looking a lot better, right? Our heading's bigger, our paragraph is bigger, you know, everything looks a little bit better. Now let's get started with this button. So for this button, I'm actually going to change it around a bit. So I'm going to give it some more padding, okay? And it's going to have padding of 0.75 EM at the top and at the bottom. And for the left and the right, it's going to have 2 EM of padding, okay? So that's how that works. Now if we check back here, as you can see, there's a little bit more padding, right? Then inside of here, I'm also going to give it a border radius of 0.2 EM, a background color of black. Now if we go back, I'm not just going to use, for example, as it's suggesting to me here, the hex code. We already set the variables here, so I'm going to use black. And how I use that is by doing var, standing for variable, and inside of here I just have to put parentheses and if we do dash dash black, okay? So that gives us that black background color. Now we can't really see anything that's inside, so maybe I should change the color. Again, we're going to do vars, or variable, and do dash dash white this time. So now if we look, yes, it's white, perfect. Now, even if I wanted to change it to pink, I could just do it without having to find the hex code, like that. Okay, now the last thing is to change the font size, so I'm going to make it 1.4 EM. So now, if we look, if I made it something static, like maybe, let's go into our inspect, and let me try to show you guys what I mean by EMs and how that's helping out here. So if I decrease the font size and make it something like 1 EM, you can see that the padding also decreases. If I made the padding something static, like 20 pixels, for example, right? Regardless of the font size, the padding would always be 20 pixels, even if I made it like 30 EM, right? So it's huge. The padding would always just be 20 pixels, right? See, as you can see, there's that padding over there. You can see that green stuff, right? So it would always just be 20 pixels of padding. But, and when I choose, reload that site, when I choose 0.75 EM and 2 EM, it's growing with the font size. So it's taking into consideration the elements that are around it and growing with that. So that's why I like using padding for, I like using EMs for padding. There. Okay. So this is one section. We got the text done. Now the next part is to get the sort of grid layout done. And there it is, so grid halves. Okay, so first thing that I'm going to do is set the display to be grid, okay? And if I grab that right here, so it's already in grid, and what the Chrome Inspector lets you do is sort of hit that so you can see it in a better way and sort of visualize what the grid actually looks like. So with that, so display grid, and then I'm going to use grid template columns, and I'm going to use 50% and 50%. So basically how this works is it's saying that I want 2 columns, right, because I have 2 different values here, and each of those columns is going to be 50% of the whole width, okay? So as you can see, here it is, okay? Now we're having some issues here because this is sort of spilling out, but we're going to fix that in just a second. But anyways, it's working, right? So it's 50% of the width here and it's 50% of the width there. If we sort of look at it now, you can see that the grid actually stops here. But this image is overflowing because we haven't set a size to that image yet, but we will in just a second. But the grid itself is taking a 50% and 50%. Next thing, we want to give it some border at the bottom. Okay? So as you can see, every one of these sections has some border. You can't see here because this is black down here. But if we look here, there's a border, right? Border, and so on. So every one of these sections has a border at the bottom to create that sort of look and feel of that like clunky neo-realistic design. So I'm going to give it a border bottom, so 2 pixels, solid, var, black. Okay. Now you're probably thinking, oh my god, it's not even been that long and you're already contradicting yourself. You know, why are you using pixels? Okay, now that's a great question. this is the one exception, because for borders, using something other than pixels might make them like really hard to see. And what I mean by that is when we get to the smaller sort of resolutions, right, or sizes, if we use, obviously our border, we don't want it to be like really thick, right? Like usually when we're creating borders, we want them to be pretty tiny and like just a little bit visible, right? So did I save that? Let's look at it. Okay, so there's our border, right? Like you can barely see it, it's barely visible. Like you don't want it to be that sort of obvious, right? But that also applies if we use something that's like EMs or REMs, right? Because it calculates it based on the width of the actual screen size. What happens is at one point the border gets so small that you can like barely even see it. You know, like if we sort of, let me do that and show you. So if I do, for example, I do 0.5 EM, right? Or even just, no, that's not working. Okay, wait, 0.5 EM, right? Now, if I go into this mode right here, as you can see, it's sort of not looking as how we want it to be, right? Even if again, we want borders to be really not visible, so if I make it 0.25 EM, as we sort of scroll, it just doesn't do very great for when we want a more responsive look. So we're just going to use pixels, that's why. Okay, so 2 pixels. Then, what I want to do is take this actual grid image, and if we look back at our grid image here, this is very simple. I just want it to have a width of 100%, okay? So now, as you see, it's not overflowing anymore, because all we're doing here is we're just taking this grid image, and we're setting it to take up 100% of the space that it's given. And the space that it's given is 50%, right? Because of our grids over here. So yes, that's how that works. Next is our, let's do our backgrounds first, and then we'll come back to our grid sticker. We'll do the grid sticker at the end, okay? So for our backgrounds, again, very simple. So it just has a background color. So variable, right? So this says pink, so I'm just going to type in pink right there. Now this one says yellow, so I'm just going to type in, yellow, okay? So already looking a little bit more like what we need, right? Now the one thing that we're missing is this sort of border down the middle, right? And how do we create that? Well, all we do is we take the, we don't just want to add the border to both of these background pinks, right? So because if I add the border to this one, like if I do border right, oh god, if I do border right, and if I do 2 pixels, solid black, right, like that, what it does is it also adds the border, if I copy and paste that, so, because in some cases, the yellow, right, so for example, in right here, I want this to have a border of right? So all of our sort of backgrounds need to have that border of right functionality. But if we go back to here, you can see that this border is like creating this unneeded look where it's on this side right here, even though I only want it to have a border of right for the yellow when it's in this section, right? So the way that we're going to be able to create that is if we just get rid of this, right? We're just going to create a separate border right class. So I'll put that all the way at the top here, and I'll call it border right. Okay, and essentially what we're going to do here, we're going to go back to our HTML page, and we're going to pick this BG pink class, and I'm going to give it another class of border right. So now, whenever we have an element that requires a border, and it's on the left side, we just have to add it to that particular class. So if I go back here and show you guys what I mean, for example, in this right here, right? In this, see it says BGTU, and then it says border right. This one doesn't have a class of border right, so it doesn't get that border to the right. So now let's go back and let's type that in. So border right, not over here, so border right, okay? And it has to say 2 pixels, solid, and then it's variable of black, okay? So now if we look, we have a border to the right. Okay. Let's fix some of our other classes as well, and that is padding. So let's look at padding. Now padding is just going to have a padding of 4.5 EM. switch back. As you can see, it's already looking a little bit better. Now, it's also going to be set to a display of flex, okay? And then we're just moving it to the middle. So it's going to be set in a vertical sort of direction, like this, flex direction column, there. And then it's also going to be justified to the center. So what that means is it's just going to fix to the center. And that's the reason that it's still at the top right here is because our images at the bottom over here are taking up that sort of space. But what I can do is just give that padding and make sure the height is set to 100%. And now it's in the true center. Okay, now finally let's set our relative class. Okay, so this is going to have pretty much, again, the same style, so width of 100%, obviously a position of relative, right, because that's what make this whole bit. Then I'm just going to display flex, and I could honestly just copy the same styles out of here, like that. Okay, now I know this looks a little bit weird, but we're going to fix it with our position absolute. No need to worry. Okay, yeah, okay. So grid sticker, let's start with this one, grid sticker. So all of our grid stickers are going to have a position of absolute. Okay, you can skip back. Okay, so they all have a position. Okay, so they all have a position of absolute. And right now they're getting stuck all the way here, and that's because we have that display flex set. Otherwise they'd be wherever they need to be. But yeah, we have the display flex set, and we're just justifying it to the center. That just means we're pushing it down to the middle here in this sort of area. Okay. Now, each of these grid stickers, as you can see, is positioned at a different part. And what I mean by that is, let's go back up. So this is positioned to the top right. This is positioned, this element right here is positioned to the bottom left. And if we scroll down, as you can see, this is also positioned to the bottom left. This is positioned to the top right. This is positioned to the bottom left. This one is a little bit different. This is positioned to the top left. This one's positioned to the bottom right. You know? So a lot of these classes are being reused, right? And again, this whole website is a lot about reusability. So let's make a couple classes for these as well. So I'm going to go back to my HTML here, and I'm going to find my grid sticker. And it's going to have this grid sticker class too, which will come in handy later when we do our Parallax Animations. So leave that there, but we're going to be a little bit more specific with our classes now. It's going to be grid sticker, and then I'll give it another class of grid sticker, or actually I'll give it a class of top right. I believe this is a top right sticker. And then I will give this a class of bottom left, okay? Now if we go into our CSS, all we need to do to select these is to type in grid sticker, okay? Because it has to have the class of grid sticker, and it also has to have the class of, let's say, top right. And when it has a class of top right, I want the width of it to be 5 rem. Let's see. So if we go back here, so let's see, let's grab our top right class. Oh, did I not spell it right? No? Okay. Okay, so it's because I'm selecting it wrong there. So make sure to get rid of that space there. Now, as you can see in our inspect right here, it has a width of 5 rem. I'll make that much bigger, maybe 20 rem, so that we can actually see. So there we go. So now, obviously, we're able to select it. So this has, again, we're selecting it through grid sticker and top right, and it has a width of definitely not 20 rem. It's going to be something more like 10. Okay, so 10 rem, and we're going to position it all the way to the top, so right here. And how I'm going to do that is by using the top and the right sort of positioning values. So from the top, we're using 2 rem. And now what this is saying is that this grid sticker is 2 rem from the top of this relative div. Okay, that's what this is saying. And then I'm going to hit right, and then I'm going to say negative 2 rem. And now what this is saying is that this is 2 rem outside of this relative box. So it's negative, so it's outside of this relative box, and it's positioned 2 rem outside. So that's what this is saying. So we have this grid sticker set up. Now we need our bottom left. So grid sticker dot bottom left. Now this one is going to have a width of 15 rem, and it's going to be set positioned absolutely. Oh, never mind. We already have it positioned absolutely there. We don't need to do that. Now this is going to be set to a bottom of 2 rem. Now what this is saying is that it's 2 rem from the bottom, right? And then we're going to move it to the right, we're going to move it to the left of negative 2 rem. So this is the exact same style as this, except it's split, okay? So it's 2 rem up from the bottom, right? And then it's negative 2 rem, so it's spilling outside to the left of this relative div, okay? So that is this section. Now, I know this section seemed like a lot, but the thing is, with the amount of reusable sort of code that we made, it's going to make it really easy for when we build future sections, because a lot of the classes are very similar, and we can just sort of copy and paste and change a couple of elements, okay? So that's it for this section. Moving on to the next one. The next section that we're going to be building is the navbar. So we have a couple links here and 2 buttons, so let's just get into that. Now I'm going to put this navbar obviously before my hero, so I'm going to add another comment. Again, Control-K, Control-C. Just type in navbar. Okay, so for the navbar, I'm going to use the sort of nav class, so nav, and then again, like I mentioned before, in our hero, dot makes that class action, so nav dot navbar. It's a class I'm going to give it. Now, inside of this navbar, I'm going to have 2 basic parts to it, okay? So if we sort of inspect this demo that I've already made, we have our logo wrapper, we have our menu, and then we have the menu button. Now the menu button, you can't see right now because it's set to display none, and that is what we will use when we make this website responsive, but we don't, we're just going to disregard that for now, and we're just going to work with the logo wrapper and the nav menu. So that's what we're going to do. So first thing, inside of here, I'm going to add the logo wrapper. Okay, so this logo wrapper is going to contain 2 different logos, okay? Now you might be wondering why, but we only have 1 logo here, right? Now if we switch over to this responsive mode right here, as you can see, when I click on this menu bar, our sort of logo right here changes to this white color instead of the black that it was before, and to get that effect, we need to have 2 separate logos. So I am going to get out of here and show you how to do that. We will get to the responsive stuff at the end of this sort of video, so yes. We're going to get to the responsive stuff later on as this sort of course goes on, but for right now I'm still going to use that logo wrapper and put both my logos in there. It's going to be called image and it's going to be called logo. Okay, now I'm just going to duplicate this. Okay, so the second one is going to have a source of, I think I called it footer logo. It's not a footer logo, so that's just the name. I don't know why I named it that, but yes, that's that. And then we have nav logo. Okay, so both of these have the class of logo. Now this top one is going to have a class of default, and our white logo is going to have a class of white. And you will see why later on. But we won't be messing with really the white or the default too much in this video. We'll figure that out later. Okay, so now I'm going to switch back to my home.css. And actually for the first time, we are going to switch away from this reusable section styling, and we are going to get started with our actual section styling. So we call this section specific styling. Okay, And the first section that we're going to be styling is the navbar. Okay, so inside of here we have our logo wrapper. So let's get that all styled and ready. So our logo wrapper is going to be displayed flex, okay, and it's going to have a flex direction of column, and it's going to be set position relatively, and it's going to have some padding. Again, don't worry too much about this, it'll make more sense as we sort of go on with it. So 2 pixels solid black. Okay, so yep, and then our logo is going to have a width of 100%, and the logo white is going to have a display setting. That's it for the logo. Now let's get started with our actual nav bar. So this nav bar, I'm going to put it above here. Okay, so our nav bar is also going to be pretty simple. It's just going to be set to display flex and flex direction column. That's it. And what I also want to do is just give it a bit of border at the bottom. 2 pixels solid, and that variable black. So now if we look at it, it looks like that. And now you can see that sort of double border there, but that's only because the logo wrapper has a border and so is the nav bar. But that's going to go in just a second because we're going to add this sort of thing at the bottom to sort of get rid of that. So don't worry about that. Let's go back to our HTML. Now, oh, did not mean to open that up. Okay, so now we're going to get out of our logo wrapper and I'm going to open up or make a new div, and this is going to be called our nav menu. Okay, so inside of our nav menu, so that's this whole bar right here, this is the nav menu. We're going to have the nav menu left that sits over here, and then the nav menu right. So the nav menu right contains the buttons, and then the nav menu left contains all our links. So we're going to have dot nav menu left. And inside the nav menu left, we're going to have a paragraph. In this paragraph, we can have a class of paragraph 2, I think. I think paragraph 2 is good. And then inside of this paragraph 2, we're going to have our link. And this link is going to have 2 classes. So it's going to have a class of link, and then it's also going to have a class of nav link. So to add 2 different classes, we just have to press dot another time after the first class. So we have a dot link, and then for our second class, we would type in another dot and then do a link in our next class. So this link is going to lead nowhere, so we can just hit hashtag. That just means it's going to go to the page that's default on, so there's no problem there. Now we're going to add in our text. This is going to say features. I'm just going to copy this a couple times. Pricing, university, and blog. Last but not least, discover. Let's sort of look at this now. Okay, that's looking fine. Yeah, okay. Then we're going to create our nav menu right. And this is just going to have 2 buttons. So button.nav button. Okay, it's just going to say login. I'm going to copy this. And if you look here, this button is a sort of different color. So it's like an inverted of this one. So it's going to have another class called dark, where we just sort of flip some of the settings around in that one. So that's going to say start selling, actually. Okay, so this is our structure. Let's look at it there. Now I'm going to switch back to our home.css and let's do some restyling. Okay, another sort of class that we're going to be reusing a lot is links. So I will make that its own sort of section. Now, okay, so links have a section, and I believe, okay, so links, I'm going to put this actually before the grid and the backgrounds. So right here, like that. And I think I'm going to grab this
padding and relative, and also put that before the grid. So I'll keep the grids to the end. Okay, that's enough of our stuff. Okay, so for our links, our link is going to have a pretty basic styling. Now, what this link is really for is it's to sort of make sure that most or all links actually by default have this sort of underline and have that blue color. And so to sort of get rid of that blue color, like on all links, so I don't have to like do the same styles every single time. What I think I can do instead is just make this sort of link class, and I can use that on different ones where I just get rid of that same text decoration of that underline. So let's do that. So text decoration, that's the underline, and then I'm just going to hit none. Okay, and then I want to change the color back to black because obviously it's blue by default. Okay, there. And I think I also I think I gave my link a class of paragraph 2. I think I can just make that one. There. Yes, okay, I think this should be fine. Okay, so a class of paragraph 1 is good. And so those are the styling things that we need for our link. Now I'm trying to think if there's anything else reusable. Okay, no, let's just get right into our section styling. So I'm going to scroll back down to here with that. Okay, so for our nav menu, this is going to be set to display flex. Okay, and so if we just save that and just look at it. Okay, so it is working, right? This is the left and this is the right, and they're both next to each other. Now all we need to do is we need to hit justify content space between, go around between, so they're pushed to the opposite ends. We will add some padding to this in just a second. Or no, we don't need padding. Wait, we'll fix it. So, because as you can see, this looks a little bit weird, but we'll fix it in just a second. So, justify content space between. And then we're going to do for the nav menu left, do the same thing, so display flex. Okay, now they're all next to each other. And it's just going to, all the items are going to be aligned to the center. So they're all on the same sort of center level. Now, the last thing that we want to do is give these links, we already have given them a class of nav link, right? And we can use this special class of nav link to give them all a margin, okay? Now I don't want any margin for the top or the bottom, I just want some for the left and the right, so they're a little bit spaced out, like that. And then what I want to do is style the nav or the nav menu to the right. Okay, this is going to be called nav menu right, or I think we can just style the buttons. I don't think we need to even get with the nav menu right. So let's do the nav button. Okay, so this is going to have some padding. So 1.5 EM for the top and for the bottom, and 3 EM for the left and the right. So as you can see, that's what they look like. It's going to have a font size of 1 EM, so a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to make sure that they have a background color of transparent, because again, or a background color of white actually. Background color of white, like that. Okay. And let's see, where is our? Okay, I'm gonna actually get that nav menu right. So nav menu right. Make sure that it's set to display flex, because we do need that. There, much better. And then what I'm going to do is give both of them some border to the left. So border left is going to be 2 pixels, solid and black. Okay. Okay, so there. Now the second one just needs that background color. So that's going to be nav button.dark.
is going to have, just going to copy this, background color of black, and a font color, so just color of white. Okay, now let's create a simple sort of hover interaction. So both these buttons can actually have a cursor of pointer, so that makes them feel like they're links, right? And then when you hover on them, so I'm going to grab the nav button. When you hover, okay, we want the background color to change to a pink. So dash pink. Okay, and for our dark button, so nav button dot dark hover, we are just going to make sure that the actual text color also changes to black to make it more easier to read, because white is a little bit hard. There we go. Okay, so these are our buttons, these are our links, and they all seem to work pretty well. Okay, so that was really it for the navbar section. Again, we're going to be doing the responsive stuff at a later time, but this is the navbar for right now. So our next section is this looping text interaction. So yeah, let's just get right into building it. I'm going to close out this right here, and I will add that. So make a comment again, looping text. Okay. Now the structure of this is pretty simple. So we have one div right here called looping text. Okay. And then we have another inside of here called looping text content. And then inside of this div, we have one called looping text heading. Okay. And then, or this should not be a div. Wait a second. Okay. So we have a paragraph element, right? And I'm going to call this looping text heading. Okay. And I'm going to type in our text in here. And the reason this is a paragraph is because this element is basically just for stylistic purposes. It's not actually a heading. And sort of for accessibility reasons, adding just this, making it a paragraph and not a heading, signifies to screen readers that this is not as important as an actual heading. This is just for styling purposes and not, because it doesn't provide any real information, right? It's just for it to look good. So, yep, that's why it's a paragraph element, even though I wrote heading in the class. Okay. Now I'm just going to duplicate this heading a couple of times. Just hitting Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V a couple times. And we actually need this too, this sort of element right here. I'm going to stick that in the sort of middle, so just like that. And I think I'll make one more heading, and I'll paste that one after here. Okay, like that. So this is our content. Now, how this interaction works is that we have our looping text right here. Now, this looping text takes up the width of the page, okay? So looping text goes from this side of the page to this side of the page, okay? But our looping text content is spilling out of the page, okay? But what our looping text does, so what this div does, is it contains everything. So we don't see that overflow that is all these extra paragraph elements. We only see what we're being shown right now. So this, from this end to this end, is the looping text div. Okay, so let me show you, right? It's just from this end to this end. Now, our looping text content is being spilled out, as you can see, it's being spilled out to all the way to that edge over there. Now, all we're doing is we're just moving this looping text sort of content inside of this looping text div, right? So the content is moving, but the looping text is staying where it is, and we have overflow hidden set to that one so that we don't see what's spilling out. If we take that out, you can see here, our scroll bar appears at the bottom of our page, and now if we select it, because the text is white, you can't see it, but this is all of the looping text, the extra text that's coming in. But if I hit overflow hidden again, if I check that box back on, then you can see that we don't see that anymore. So that's what we're going to be making. That's the sort of structure behind this. Now let's go into our CSS and make this possible. Actually, because this for this interaction, we don't even really need JavaScript. We can make the entire interaction in just CSS. So looping text, okay? Now we're going to have our looping text div, right? So again, overflow hidden is the main component to this. It's going to have a background color of black, okay? And that's pretty much it, okay? Then for our looping text content, the stuff that's going to be moving, this is going to be set to display flex. It's going to have a flex direction. Actually, we don't even need a flex direction of row because that's the default. And one of the sort of most important properties here is to make sure to set a, okay, to sort of emphasize what I mean, let me close this out and I'm going to give that, we're not done yet, but I'm just wanted to show you. So this looping text heading is going to have a color of white, and that will sort of explain what I really mean. 1 second. I'm just going to change the size of this. So the font size is going to be 5 Okay, like that. So if you sort of look here, what's happening is that this text is not going from left to right fully. It's sort of wrapping, right, to make space and try to fit all of this. So if I get rid of this overflow hidden again on this sort of content, as you can see, it's trying to keep everything like the sizes of it same, but it ends up wrapping because it doesn't have space to fit all of it. And even if it did have space, like it's still like spilling over. Like no matter, even if it did the wrapping, right, it's still spilling over. So to fix this sort of wrapping thing, all we have to do is we have to go into our looping text content, right, and we have to set flex wrap to be no wrap. And now if we reload the site. Oh, and one more setting. That's in our looping text heading, we also need to make sure to set the white space to be no wrap. Not normal. No wrap. Okay, so now as you can see, it works. Okay? We're also going to give this looping text heading some margin. So it's going to have a little bit of margin, maybe so 0 from the top and the bottom, but 1 even for the left and to the right. Even that might be too much. I think I might do 0.5. 0.5. Let's see. Okay. 0.25. Okay, yeah, 0.25 looks about right. Now, the last thing that we want to do is to get the actual moving interaction. And how we're going to do that is we're going to go back to our looping text content here. And to add animations in CSS, I'm just going to reference the actual animation. So this is the animation, alright. I'm going to use the shorthand property, which basically means it combines all the animation properties into one. So the name of the animation I'll set up in just a second, but it's going to be called Marquee. That's another way to describe this sort of looping text interaction. It's going to take 30 seconds for this animation to finish. The easing is going to be linear, right? And it's going to go on forever, right? So I want to call it infinite. So that's what I want to set for that. Now let's design our actual animation. Now this is a pretty simple animation. If you've worked with something like, for example, Webflow before, you know what keyframes are. So it's setting like maybe at 0% you want this to happen, maybe at 100% you want this to happen. And the same thing really applies in CSS as well. I mean, so our name or our identifier is Marquee, right? So we're going to say keyframes at Marquee, right? And what we want to happen is we want it to go from this transform translate. So transform translate is our sort of property. So we want it to go from the x position, right? So the x-axis goes from left to right, it's horizontal. We want to travel from 0. I'm just going to copy this over, and I'm going to say 2, and we want it to transform translate to -50%. So now if we save and we look at our animation right here, it should be working. I'll make it 5 seconds just so that we can see the whole animation all at once. There. this not working. Okay, maybe I'll do negative 80% because as you can see, we saw a little bit of a glitch there. Let's see. Okay, now I'm just gonna hit 30 seconds, and then, as you can see, our animation is starting. Okay, so that's it for the infinite loop interaction. Let's move on now. Okay, now we have this section with this sort of, not really sure what to call it, but it's basically the section that has this sort of rounded loop, okay? And, yeah, so this rounded loop. Now, when it gets to the responsive mode, it does turn into this rectangle, but we're not at that part yet, so I'm not going to try to show you guys that. But, yes, so we have this, and we also have our lottie animation, and that's going to be fun to sort of use. So, let's get into it. Okay. I'm going to switch back to my, oh, okay, there we go. Okay, now, again, HTML first, so this is going to be called gum head, okay, or you can call it just loop, but that's pretty similar to the looping text, and that's sort of why I didn't use that, but yes, okay. Now, this section is going to have a class of section, and the reason for that is because the section class is just going to give some padding all around. As you can see, there's some space above here and there's space below, and that sort of is useful in lots of other places across this website, like this place right here, and yeah, like here for example, so stuff like that. So let's just start using that. I'm going to go back to here and let's go. Okay. So the section is going to have a class of section, okay, and inside of it, we're going to have another reusable sort of class, and that is our text container class. Again, pretty similar, we're going to be using this in here as well, so we're going to be making a class for it called text container. And then we're going to put a heading 3 in here. So heading 3. And this is going to say this, so you know all those weird ideas you have. Okay, so that's our text container, that's really it for this section, and then we have our actual looping lottie thing. I think first, let's get done with the text container, and then we'll come back to do this lottie, only because it's a little bit complicated. So I'll add a new thing called gum head. And I'm going to add the section, where is it? So when it says other reusable code, I'm going to go back up there. I'm going to add section to that section. So this is going to be, again, pretty basic. So it's going to have position, relative, some padding, so 5 EM for the top and bottom, nothing for the left and right. It's going to be set to flex displayed, right, flex direction of column, aligned to the center and justified to the center as well. It's also going to have some border at the bottom, so 2 pixels solid black. And we're going to just, yeah, that's it. Now I'm going to go back to my section specific styling for gum head. I'm just going to search for it. I just hit Control F to search for it instead of scrolling for that long. Yeah, okay. So, dot loop outer. Okay. Now let's get started. Oh, what was I saying before? The text container. Oh my god. Okay, let's go back. We're going to type in reusable. Okay. The text container is going to be part of that same section, only because, again, we're going to be reusing it a lot. So, text container. Now, same sort of styles. Just going to copy that, paste that in here. It's going to have a width of 100% and some padding. It's going to have 0 padding at the top and the bottom, but 4 EMs of padding to the left and the right. So it looks like this. And then finally, let's go back to our headings, and we're going to add our heading 3 to the lineup. So heading 3 is going to just be, let me see, the heading 3 is going to have a font size of 2.25 EM and a line height of 1.2. Okay, perfect. Now let's get started with the actual loop. So I'll go back to my HTML here, and okay, right here. So let me sort of explain this, let me explain this first, and then we can actually write all this HTML coming down. So if we sort of inspect this loop again, we have the loop outer, right? So that is this first sort of yellow div that you see with this border on the outside, okay? Then we have our loop inner. Okay, now this is this element, and this contains the sort of arrows and stuff that you see. This is where most of our content is housed, or actually all of it, right? And this loop inner contains also another border. But you might be wondering, well, this border is being cut off, right? Like, we don't see the border here, we don't see the border here. Well, that's because we're making use of the background color property on these pieces of text. And yeah, it's really cool. I'll show it to you guys as we keep building, but that's the idea behind it. We have our loop inner, and then we have 2 rows here. So this is the top row, and this is the bottom row. Now both of these rows sit at the basically the tops of their respective loop inner container, and they sit like right in the middle of this inner border. So it works out perfectly to get that arrow over there. And then we have our lottie container, which sits above all of them. And this is actually sort of, this lottie container contains our lottie file, which we're going to be using the lottie player element. So that should be fun. Yeah, let's just get started. Okay, so first I'm going to call get our loop outer, okay? And then inside of here we have our loop inner. And then, like I was mentioning before, our loop rows, okay? So inside of the loop row, we have a loop row item, okay? Loop row item. And then inside of each of these items, we have the paragraph with the class of paragraph 1. And away. Now I just duplicate this because we have 2 loop row items, and okay, so our 2 loop row items. And then I'm just going to duplicate this loop row another time, okay, to create the one at the bottom over here, right? And just change that text actually, so it says start small. Our last piece of text. Okay, so this is all the text that we have. And I think that's it. Okay, let's make, that's both of our loop rows, so I'll just close that out. And then we have the middle part, which is our lottie container. So this is loop lottie container. And then we're going to use this right here, and I'm actually just going to copy this and put this right in here. So I'll paste actually this code into the description so that you can get it from there too. But this is the sort of code for the Lottie player. Now this Lottie player comes from, again, this script that we referenced before. This is not a native HTML feature, so this comes from that package, and I'm just referencing this JSON file. Now the JSON file, if we find it here, is a bunch of code, but basically this converts into the Lottie through this Lottie player. Now, again, this is always going to be looping. That's why we specified this here, and it's going to autoplay, so no sort of things. We also have the styles set here, and I'll change this in just a second, but this is the styles that I've set here just so that you can see it. Now if we switch back, we should be able to see it. There it is. I'm actually going to make it something like 50%. That may even be too small. But let's leave that at 50% for now. And let's get ready styling. Okay. So this is going to be section specific. So scroll down for a while, and there we are. So let's do our loop outer. Now, like this sort of, oh, didn't mean to put that in. So display flex, right? Column, and then, so that's our outer. Now it's going to have a width of 100%, but it's going to have a maximum width of 80 VW. Now VW stands for viewport width, so that's from, like, for example, VH would be viewport height, so that's the entire sort of the screen size right here, that our browser, whatever you can see in the screen right here, that's the viewport, right? So what you're able to view. Now the viewport height would be the space from the top here to the bottom here of this browser window, and then the viewport width would be from the left here to stopping before this inspect panel right there. This is just saying 80% of the screen size. I'm going to type in 75 actually. Yeah, okay. Then I'm going to give it a background color. Oh, okay. Give it a background color of that yellow. Okay. And then a border radius of 30 rem. This looks a little bit weird right now, but it will look less weird as in just a little bit, okay? And then we're going to give it a border of 3 pixels, solid flat black, like that. And it's going to have a little bit of padding of 3 rem. Now this is a little bit important. This number that we put in here, it will make sense in just a second, but that number is a bit important. Then we're going to go and design our loop outer, or sorry, our loop inner. It's going to have a width of 100%, like that, okay? And a minimum height of 13 v8. Then I'm going to give it a position of relative and a border of 2 pixels, solid black. Okay? So yes, this looks a little bit weird, but again, bear with me. Look a little bit less weird in a little bit. Okay, so border radius 30 rem. This should be 30 pixels probably. Yep, okay. Then I am going to grab this loop lottie container. And make sure that the position on this one is set to absolute, and then give it some spacing at the bottom. Okay? There. That looks way better now. Okay. So we have our loop. Where'd it go? Oh my god. Okay. So we have our. There we go. Okay. Now this is positioned absolutely and has positioned bottom in the middle. Now I'm going to grab this loop inner, and actually to get this loop container to be centered, I'm going to set this to be display flex and flex direction column, and just align the items to the center, like that. And okay, get rid of the sizing on that loop, that lottie player, and I'm actually just going to add the sizing to the loop lottie itself. I'm going to give it a width of 50% there. Maybe a bit smaller, like 30%. Okay, yeah, that looks good for now. Now let's get started with the loop row. So loop row. This is going to have a width of 100%, like that. And then it's going to be set to display flex, have been just aligned to the center, item center, and justified with some space in between. That's just pushing, so what this is doing is it's making sure that these items are vertically in the same center, right? It's being sort of pushed together like that, as you can see, and then it's being put all the space in between them so they're pushed to opposite edges of the same place. And that's what's happening. Now both of these are going to be positioned absolutely, and that's because we want to position them over this sort of border over here. And okay, so that's not working very well. And the reason that this loop is sort of shrunk down is because we haven't set a minimum height to it. And I want to set the minimum height to be something like 15 rem. So it's usually pretty big, like that. Now that both these are set to position absolute, I'm going to move. This is going to have a position at the top of -1 again. Now, for our one that's supposed to go on the bottom, we need to give it a different class that we're able to put that at the bottom. This is going to have a class of bottom, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to grab loop row, and then we're going to hit dot bottom. And then what we're going to do is this is just going to have a top of auto, but the bottom this time will be -1m, like opposite of that one right there, like that. Now you might be noticing that the loop row is not perfectly on the line like they are in this sort of in our demo here, and we're going to fix that. The reason that that's happening is because our paragraph 1 right here, it has all this margin that's sort of pushing it up and pushing it down in a way that isn't putting it on line. So let's just get rid of that margin. I'm going to go to our loop row here, and for paragraph I'm actually going to grab the loop row item. So let's just go here, call it loop row item, right? And then from here I'm going to hit dot paragraph 1. Make sure there's a space because this is getting children of the element. So if we sort of hover, you can see it's like that. But if you don't leave the space, then it's trying to get elements with both of these classes, which is not true because we don't have elements with both those classes. Just hit space like that. Now this should be have a margin of 0. That's all the style. There. Now it's on top of the line, which is exactly what we want. Okay. So a couple things for these. We're going to go back to actually styling the loop row item now that we got that out of the way. Now for this, what we're going to do is we're going to get some padding. So we're going to reduce the padding at the top and the bottom, make sure there's no padding there, and add it to the left and to the right. This should say like that. I'm actually going to make it even more, maybe something like 3. And then what I'm going to do is make sure to give this a background color
of yellow. So what that creates is the padding, because it's a part of the element itself, it adds this sort of effect to it. And that's exactly what we want. So, yes, maybe make that a little bit less. Okay, so make sure you hit width. Okay, so I messed that up there. Okay, so for our loop row, make sure you hit a width of maybe something like 80%. Yeah, there. Now it's perfectly blocking out our lines, right? Because of that background color that we added. Right here. Perfect. Now, the last thing that we need is to get this arrow. And how we're going to get this arrow is by adding a background image. So background image. It's going to have a URL. And then we're just going to add the arrow to the right. Okay? Okay. That's a lot of arrows, so let's just get rid of that. We're going to call it, make sure to give the background repeat of no repeat. There we go, way better. And to sort of center and bring it down to the middle, we are going to change the background position to be 0%, like that. And then we are going to make sure that the background size is 0.75 again. Let's go back to the code here, and we'll make it even smaller. Maybe say 70% for that loop row. That should bring it way closer. There we go, better. Now, for our final thing, we just need to change the arrows on this here, because otherwise our loop is going nowhere, right? We need to make sure that these arrows right here are set to left. So how are we going to do that? So we can go back to our HTML here, and we're going to grab the loop row item, just add this class of left, and then, so we're going to grab it, we're going to say loop row item dot left should have this background image of arrow left. Now if we sort of skip back, okay, so it still looks a little bit weird, and that is also for a reason, so let's go back and let's fix that too. We just need to change the background position to be from 0% to 100%. Let's see. There we go. So now this, what that does is it's just moving the background image from the left of the item to the right of the item, so that it sort of ends at that, like that. Okay. That's it for this loop row section. Actually, I think one more thing that I want to do is add a little bit of margin at the top of this loop outer. So margin top, something like 5. That's a little bit too much, maybe 3 EM. There we go. Just a little bit of spacing to separate these contents, alright? Okay, that's it for this section. Let's go to the next one. The next couple of sections are all very similar. So for example, this is a grid, and then if we scroll down a little bit, also a grid again, and it sort of just keeps going, yeah, until we get to this sort of section here, but even after this one, there's more grids, and again, this sort of text section we already saw up there as well, more grids. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop maybe until here, and just complete all the grids, and these sort of text container sections. And then we'll make a sort of separate section where we do this part with all of these coins that have a parallax animation. So let's finish all the grids first, and then we'll sort of fill in the gaps as to what we don't have yet. So that's my plan. Okay, so let's just go and go back up here. Now this is the first grid that we're going to be creating. So I'm just going to switch back to my code here. Okay, close this up. Okay. Now I'm going to call this, or make a comment and say grid, I think these are comics.
So let's make sort of the same classes that we've been using recently, and that's dot. I'm going to do dot for the div block, right? So dot grid halves, like that. Now, instead of here, like a similar structure to our hero, we're going to put in our background, our padding, and then inside we will sort of do whatever we need to do. So let's just close that out for a second. So instead of here, I'm going to have another div that says, this has a background color of black, so let's make one for that. Dot bg black, right? And then instead of here, we're going to have our padding class, okay? Now, because both of these contain images and the sort of comic bubble that we see right here sits on top of these images, but it's positioned a little bit differently, I'm going to put another relative class inside of here so that we can add all of our images. So this is the basic structure. Now I'm just going to copy this background black because it's the same exact thing except we just have the background color of yellow here. So, okay. So we have our padding. Now the next thing for us to create is to actually get these images and make that comic bubble that we see right there. Okay, so I'm going to get an image and give it a class of grid image like I've been using previously. And I'm going to go back in here and grab that image. It's called book.svg, okay? And then we're going to make our comic bubble. So let's just set up the structure for now in our HTML. It's going to be called comic bubble is going to be the div. And inside of here, we have this text. So that's going to be called dot paragraph. Oh, it's going to be a paragraph. So p dot paragraph 2. So it's going to be like our paragraph 1 that we have already sort of defined up here, but it's going to be a little bit of a smaller font size. So let me just copy that text. Okay. So now I'm actually going to take whatever is inside of this relative class and paste it into our second div over here, only because it's basically the same thing with different text and a different image. So just paste this new text into this one right here. And I believe the image for this one is blog.svg. Okay. So if we go back to our actual div, you can see that we have a lot of our sort of structure already set up because of that reusability in our classes that we've mentioned before. So our whole structure is set up, our images are centered and aligned, they have their padding. So the only new things that we're making here is these comic bubbles. We should also add the background color for this background black. So let's go back. Let's find where I put all those backgrounds. Right here. So dot background black. Just copy this, right? And it's going to say dash black, like that. So there we go. Now let's get started with making our comic bubble. Just going to scroll down. Okay, so I'm going to make a new sort of section for this. I'm going to call this comic, or actually I'll say grid tags comic. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have select our comic bubbles, and what we sort of want to do with our comic bubbles here is we want to make it like a rounded rectangle sort of, and it's going to have this text inside of it with some padding. So let's just do that. Oh wait, I should say comic bubble. Okay. It's going to have some padding on all sides, so 2.5 EM. A background color of white, so I'm going to just select that, like that. Our border, 2 pixels, solid black. And a border radius, right? Oh, okay. Let's look at it now. Okay, that looks pretty much how we want it to look, right? Do we already have our paragraph 2? No. Okay, so let's define our paragraph 2 to get our text sort of the size. Oh, okay. To get our text sort of that size that we want it to be. So I'm going to go back up to my paragraphs here and define the paragraph 2. Alright, so this is going to have a font size that's a little bit smaller than our paragraph 1, so 1.25 EM instead of 1.5, and it's going to have a line height
of 1. And that's it. Okay, now let's go back down here. Okay, so let's look at our finished product. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, the last thing that we need to define is to get our comic bubble to sit in this sort of general area right here. So to do that, we're going to use position absolute. So position absolute, right? Now let's see. We're going to position it to the top. So it's 7 EM from the top, and from the left, it's 5 EM. Let's look at that. That might be a bit too much. Let's make it 2 EM from the left, and maybe 4 EM from the top. Let's do negative 2 EM from the left. Okay, that looks a little bit better. I still want to move this quite a bit up, so maybe I'll do top of 2 EM. Let's do negative 2 for the top as well. So yeah, a lot of web design is just messing around with this. I'm going to make it even, I'm going to move it down just a little bit, so maybe negative 1 EM. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Yeah, a lot of web design is just messing around until it looks, until it looks how you want it to be. Okay, so that's that for a comic bubble, and I think that's it for this section. Yes, okay. Now let's get started making this text section right here. So this one is also pretty simple. Go back to my HTML here, close this out. Okay, so I'm going to call this text section. Now, just define our section again, right? And we're going to have our div of text container, okay? And inside of here, we're going to have our heading 1. That's this part right here. We're going to have a paragraph, and then we're going to have a link, okay? So, heading 1 is going to say, make your own code. Okay, we're going to have a paragraph. Now again, what's making this so easy is that we already have all our classes done, right? So we don't have to keep redefining the same things, and it's going to look relatively good without even having to do any styling for this particular section. But if we check it out right now, see that's almost exactly how we want it already. So yes. Now we're going to grab for our link, how this link is going to be set up is it's going to have the actual link, right? Then we're going to have this arrow, and then we're going to have this underline that appears when you hover on this link. And to get that to work, we can't just have a link element. So I'm going to make this link element, and I'm going to call this underline link wrapper, or just leave this as a div actually. So we're making a div called underline link wrapper, and instead of here we're going to have our actual link, and this is going to have 2 classes. So it's going to have that base class that we made of link, and then it's going to have another class of underline link. Okay, so now just give that an href, so that's where it's going, right? It's going to be hashtag. So then the actual text inside of here is going to be explore features. Now let's go look. Okay, so we already have some of our basic link stylings done. So if I take out this link class that we defined earlier, you can see that we have that underline, we have that blue color, but because we sort of already defined that in the link here, right, the text decoration and the color, then we don't have to worry about sort of saying that over and over again every time we meet or make a link, okay? Now the next thing that we want to do is our actual image sort of arrow that comes up. So let's add that. It's going to have a class of underline link arrow, okay? And just grab the arrow right, okay? Then finally we're going to have the underline link line, okay? And this is going to be the actual line that appears. There's going to be no content inside of this. We're just going to make it that sort of line that appears like that. Okay, now let's get started with that. I'm going to go back up to my links actually, and I'm going to call this underline link, Okay. Okay, let's go back here. Now, I don't really want to change any of the font sizes for this link. I just want to make it a little bit bolder. So to make it a little bit bolder, I'm just going to grab the font weight property and make that 600 instead of the normal, usual sort of 400 there. Now it's a bit more bolded. Now let's fix our arrow, because it looks a little bit too big right now, so let's fix that. And give it a width of 1.2 em. Let's see what that looks like. Better. And a little bit of margin to the left, so there's some space between this and our actual text, so maybe 0.5 em of space. There we go. Now let's make that line. Okay. So underline, link, line. Oh. Now this is going to have a width of 0%, right? And it's going to have the height of 2 pixels and a background color of black. Okay, so now we don't really see the line, but it is there. And actually, what we can do to give it an even better interaction than what I have here is sort of add that effect where it grows in its width. So right now I have a width of 0%, right? So now what I want to do when we hover on this is I'm going to grab the underline link wrapper, and I'm going to use the selector hover. Now when I hover on the underline link wrapper, I want to grab the underline link line, and I want to give that a width of 100%. Okay. Now if we sort of hover on this one, it sort of happens immediately, right? And to make it sort of take some time, what we need to do is add a transition to our underline link line, and we're going to give it a transition of all 0.3 seconds maybe, and make it even. Now if we try, there we go. So we have a nice animation that sort of works as we hover on this line, and it grows like that. Okay, that's a really simple interaction. It didn't even take us that many lines of code, and it was, yeah. So that's a simple interaction that we could add. Now one more thing, we just want to center this text here. So let's do that. Make sure that, okay. So to do this, what we can do is, let me go back here and figure out how I centered it in here, because I think I might have a better idea, but let's see. Okay, so what I did here was I just gave it a style in the actual HTML to be aligned to the center. Let me just bring that out so you can see it there. Text align center. And while that's useful sometimes, it's not really the best practice to define it here. So instead what I'm going to do is make another class. So I'm going to go to my HTML, and because I want this paragraph to always be centered, I'm going to give it a class of centered. I'll call it maybe text centered. Okay? And then I'll go back to my reusable code here, and I'll make a class called text centered. And this is a really simple class. All it does is it just sets the text align to be centered. So if we go back, yeah. And the reason this might be really helpful is because throughout our sort of website, we're going to need to use this text align center. So this can be really a reusable class. Okay. Now, moving on, let's go to the next section, which is this another grid. So let's make that grid. Okay. Like this. So I'm just going to copy and paste it because we can get rid of what we don't need, but it saves a little bit of time. Okay. So for this next section, as you can see, the image on the left does not have any padding, so we can just get rid of that padding class. Like that, and just place the image right here and call it grid image. It's going to be, I'm not sure what this actually is. I think it's, 1 second. Okay, so it's going to be called feature 1.svg. There. So if we go back, okay, we also want to change the background color. It's going to be background color teal.
And our text is going to have a background color of white. The text is going to have some padding, and we'll change what's in here in just a second. But let's go look at it. Okay, so there's no teal class, so let's add that. And we also need to give it that border class again. Remember that border right class that we used here? So let's give this background teal a border right class. There we go. Let's go back in here and find our PG. There we go. Teal, and it's just going to have a background color of teal. There we go. Okay, that's the text. That's the image. Now let's do the text. Okay. So we're going to bring in a new sort of heading here, and that's the heading 2. So let's do h2.heading2, and it's going to say sell anything, like that. Okay. Next up, we're going to bring in our paragraph again. Paragraph 1. Not 2. Paragraph 1. Let's copy and paste that text. Go over there. Okay, then we need to make this list, so let's set that up. Okay, so we're going to make a list, a UL, so that's an unordered list. And inside of here, we're going to have a list item. And so our list item is also going to have a class of, not class, it's going to have a class of list item. And then inside of each list item, we're going to have a paragraph element. And it's going to say paragraph 2. And your top 10 lists. Okay. Now, let's just duplicate this a couple of times. Like that. Let's go look. Okay. So it's not perfect, but we're going to fix it. So let's go back in here and go to our headings. Okay. Let's add our heading 2. It's going to have a font size of, I believe, 3 EM. Let's check that out. Okay, that looks about right, but I just want to make sure. Yeah, okay, that's right. And it's going to have the same line height of 1.1. Okay, now let's do our list. Okay, so let's add that to our sort of reusable code, so lists. Okay, so the list is going to have a width of 100%, and how we're going to set this up is we're going to use grids. So we're going to set it up with grid, and it's just going to be one column. So grid template columns. It's going to be one column that takes up the whole thing, and the row gap, so the space between each of the rows, is going to be 1.5 EM, because right now they're all sort of pushed up against each other. So let's add that. Okay, and we're going to also set the list style type none. And what that means is we're going to get rid of that bullet that's there. There we go. Now for each of our list items, we're going to have some padding to the left of 2 rem and a background image of another one of our arrows. So let's grab that. Arrow right. Okay, now this background is going to have a size of 1.25 rem. It's going to be positioned to the left and to the center. Then it's not going to repeat either. So background repeat, no left. Now if we look at it, as you can see, our sort of arrows are there signifying that this is a list. And then all we need to do is just change the actual text. So, or no, actually, we don't need to change the font size, I think. This is pretty good. Okay, perfect. That is this section. And now this one is a little bit different. So, let's start with this one. Close this out. Okay, so this one is not supposed to be called Grid Comics. This is Grid Sell Everything. Okay. Now let's make our next grid, which is the Grid Creator 1. Because we're going to have multiple creators. We're going to have this one, and this one. So 3 of them. Okay, So let's add another one of these grid halves, okay? Now this is going to have a background of pink, okay, and some padding. And then we're going to add our heading 3 again, so heading 3. And then this is going to be that text, if I'm just going to grab it like that. And then finally we're going to have our paragraph at the bottom. So be that paragraph 2, and it's just going to say this. Okay, so now if we look, okay, so it looks a little bit weird, but not too bad. Now, I think what I'm going to do is get rid of that font weight. So let's go back to our heading 3. Yeah, make sure that the font weight is 400. That's the normal. There we go. And I'm going to give this heading 3 just this once. I'm going to use the style property here and give it a margin bottom of 4. There we go. And then to our right, we're going to have our image. So that's also going to be another background pink. So that BG pink. This is going to have padding and then relative. And then all we need to do now is add both our images. So it's going to have image.grid image, and the source is going to be resources creator profile. Okay, and then we're going to have our second image, and this is going to be the sticker. So image dot grid sticker. So we've already used that grid sticker before, but we have this one right here, grid sticker. And we're going to go to resources and creator sticker. Now if we look at it, okay, so it's like that. Let's sort of fix it, grid sticker. This is going to have that same class that we had before, as you can see, because this one is also going to be positioned to the bottom left. So we can reuse that class that we defined before, called grid sticker bottom left. Bottom left. Now if we go back, oh, okay, this is the one. There, that should be working, but it's not. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, okay, wait. No, it's not grid sticker bottom left, it's just dot bottom left. Okay, there. Now it should be working. There we go, finally. Okay, so it's that. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just sort of fast forward all this part, because I'm just going to be copy and pasting and changing the text inside and the images, so there's nothing new to be really learned here. But I'll fast forward to the next couple of sections, because this one, again, is pretty similar to the one here, where I'm just getting rid of the list and changing the text around. So I'll just fast forward through this. Okay, so with this next section right here, I wanted to sort of jump in only because the actual stickers are positioned in the top left and the bottom right instead of the bottom left and the top right. So we're going to style that. I should just want to change that, so make that creator 3 sticker. There we go. So now we go like, okay, so yeah, let's just change this. So this is going to say top left now, because we want this sticker to go to the top left, but it's not styled yet, so I'm going to figure that out. This is going to say bottom right. Okay,
Now let's go and style this. So I'm just going to copy what I have here and make this top left and make this bottom right. Okay, so some of the things are going to be different. Okay, so top left is going to have a width of 10 rem, pretty much the same, and it's just going to be set to, instead of right, it's going to say left. And now if we check back on here, as you can see, it's positioned where it needs to be, and the bottom right is going to have, again, the same styling, except instead of saying left, it's going to be set to the right. So we're just changing around some of the classes. Yep, that's all I wanted to show you. Now we're moving on to our next section where I will actually talk through and explain, and that's this section right here. The next section is going to be this one with all these sort of coins scattered across, and when we get to sort of animating our interaction, we're going to add a parallax element that causes them to sort of lightly move up. Okay, so let's just go to our HTML and set that up. Okay, this is going to be called the income section. So grab a section, give it that class, and okay. So in here, we're going to add a text container, text-container, and we're going to have a heading. It's going to be called the income heading. Now, it's going to be a little bit bigger than our actual heading. That's why I'm giving it a different class, but yes, okay. Now, we're going to also have a paragraph 1 that serves as this, and just grab that text. Okay, and now let's get out of this text container, and I'm just going to start adding all of the images. So we're going to give it a class of income coin, and just, okay, so it's going to have the source, I believe, just income, so income 1. Now, okay, what I'm going to do is, because there's so many of these classes, I am just going to style them right in HTML, only because the only thing that they really need to style is the width and then their positioning sort of attributes, so, and they're all different, so it wouldn't make sense to create classes for all of them, so yeah. So I'm going to have a width of 10 rem, top of 2 rem, and a left of -5 rem. Now I'm just going to duplicate this a couple times because I believe there's 5 of these actual coins. So it's 4 and that's 5. We don't need that one. Okay. So they're all going to have that income coin class, but I'm going to change around their different attributes. So the second one is going to have 13 rem as the width. The third one is going to have 9 rem, 12 rem for the fourth, and 14 rem for the fifth. Now if we don't look at them, okay, so yeah, that's because we need to set them to position absolute, and that's why we have the income coin class. So let's scroll all the way down and make a new section for income section, and let's make sure that the income coin is set to position absolute. Okay, now that's because they all have the same sort of top and left, so let's change that. So the second one is going to have a top of -10 rem, and then it's going to have a left of 15 rem. So as you can see, they're spreading out a little bit. Now the third one is going to have a top of 6 rem and a right of 5 rem. So we position all the way to the right here, like that. Now the fourth one is going to have a top of 20 rem, so it's pretty far down, and a right of -5 rem, like that. Now it is spelling out a section, but we're going to add that image later that serves as a background that will sort of cause it to not be spelling out of the section itself, so 1 second. But yes, so this fifth income coin is going to have a top of 22 rem and a left of 7 rem. Let's see. Okay, perfect.
now let's add our background image. Now by background, I'm talking about this one right here. So add that image dot. This isn't even in the section actually, so I'm just going to add that. Income BG. Okay, and we're going to make sure to give it a style property that just makes sure that the width is 100%. Okay, so as you can see right now, the coin is sort of spilling off and creating this horizontal scroll bar, and we definitely don't want that. And to get rid of that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab our section, find the section, is make sure that the overflow is set to hidden. Perfect. Okay, now one more thing that we need to do is get rid of this padding at the bottom. So let's go back here, because as you can see there's this padding at the bottom that we have applied to all of our sections, right? Padding at the top and the bottom, but for this particular section we just want there to be not any padding at the bottom. So we're going to add a style, make sure padding bottom is set to 0. Now it's not set to 0, okay. Now the last thing we need to do is just, make this income heading a bit bigger. So income heading, and this is going to be pretty huge, so a font size of 9 EM. Okay, there we go. Now, I think that's it for this section. Now for this next section down here, it's pretty much the same as some of our other ones, so I'm going to go and grab that from our HTML here. Like that. And just paste that in. This one says pricing. Okay, and the only thing that we're changing is the sort of layout. So we're going to have the text to the left instead of the right as it usually is, and put the image to the right. Okay, now let's change. Okay, so this is going to have a background color of neon, the text, right? Same heading, same thing. Now we just need to add the underline link, so I'm going to search for that underline and grab that from here and just paste that in here. Oh, okay, here, and just go back. Okay, so what does this say here? View pricing, so let's add that. View pricing. Okay. Now, for our image on the side, it's just going to have padding and an image. Oh, okay, so we need that relative class because as you can see, there's a sticker here, this one here. So let's add relative, then let's paste in our image inside of here, and then let's get our sticker. So, grid sticker, and then some bottom left. I think this is called, what is this called? 1 second, let's look for it. Pricing sticker is what it's called. Okay. Let's look at it. Okay, we just have to change a couple things, and that's... Okay, so let me grab that text first. Here as well. Okay. That. Then let's go back in here. Okay, so the text is different. We just need to change this image to... There we go. Okay, perfect. Let's add that neon class, so BG. Okay. Neon. Make sure that that background color is also neon. That. Okay. Now this also needs a border to the right, so let's add that. Neon, border right, and we're going to get rid of this from the yellow class, like that. Okay, after this we have another one of our text sections, so we can copy and paste that as well. Close this grid out. And we just need to change some of the text. So
this one. This, okay. Okay, like that. And then it says explore university until the features at that link. And we just have one last paragraph 1, or paragraph 2 I believe this is, so paragraph 2 that says university. Okay. So that's good. Now the last thing that we need to do here is just center our heading. So make sure we go in here, style, text. Oh, we already have our we have a class for that, and it's called text center. So let's add that. There we go. So we don't even have to worry about adding that for everyone. We just already have that class. Perfect. Now we have one last section here. This is going to be pretty similar to the previous one. So grab that. Actually, the image is going to be again on the left this time, so I'm going to grab a different grid. Okay. Okay, there. This is going to be grid. I think this is book. Okay. This is just going to say book. Entrepreneur book. Okay, now we need to change that background color to be black. Okay, and same thing for this right here, black. Now our text has to be white, so I'm just going to grab this BG black right here and make sure to set the color in here as well and just make it white. Oh, I should probably spell white, right? There, that's easier than going and doing it for every single element. Okay, now, what do we do now? Okay. We need to add this sort of bio area here, so let's add that. Go to here, okay, so .bio is going to be a div. Now, inside of here, we're going to have an image, and it's going to be called bio image. Okay, let me just increase this there. Image.bio image. Okay, it's going to be called this there, like that. And then we're going to have this text that we have here, so let's add that as well. And inside of here, there's going to be a paragraph 2 that says the name of, I believe, the founder of Gumroad, I think. Yes. And then we're going to have another paragraph 2. Oh, God. Okay. Another paragraph 2. Graph, I can't spell today. Okay. That says this. Okay. Let's go back in here. Okay, so what do we have so far? Okay. Now let's get started with actually styling this. So let's go to this one right here, and I'll call this, what is this? The grid has book. Okay, let's make sure that our sort of bio here has a width of 100%. It's displayed flex so that the image and the text is placed next to each other. And we'll align the items, align items to the center. Like that. And I'm just going to grab that image. Make sure it has just a little bit of margin to the right. So it's like this. And then I'm going to grab, okay, so I'm going to select bio. And then I'm going to grab the paragraph 2 that's inside of here. Actually, no, okay, we can do it because there's 2 paragraphs. So I'm going to go back to here to my second paragraph that contains this sort of text, the one below his name. And all I want to do here is just lower the font size. So maybe 0.9 around. Or sorry, 0.9. Like that. Okay, and then for the whole bio, actually, let's give some margin to the bottom of that as well. Turn around like that. Okay, that looks way better. So that's it for this section as well. I maybe should just change some of that text. So let's go back in here. Now one more. Okay, now the last thing that we need to do is this really simple section here, and then our footer. So let's get started with that. The next section that we have is fairly simple. It's just some text in the button. But after that, we have the footer, which has a couple of links and these icons. So let's get started with building those. Okay, so first things to do here, close this out and let's get started with this really simple section. So I'm going to call it text section because that's pretty much what it is. Now we're going to bring in a section, and I'm also going to give it a class of background pink because that's going to help us. And if we look down, there we go. Now instead of here, we're just going to have a very simple heading 1 and a button that I think has the class of button primary. So now if we just go back and add that same sort of text, let's just copy this, like that. Okay. Oh, I forgot to add our text container. Let me just grabbing that and putting our text container inside of here. There we go. Okay, now we have that padding. All we need to do is just align this text. So I'm going to grab that heading 1, make sure that text center class is on there. There we go. Okay. I'm also going to give it actually just, I'm also going to give it just a little bit of margin at the bottom. Oh, not really sure what happened here. Okay. I'm going to give it some margin at the bottom. And so let's just make that style margin bottom, maybe not too much. There we go. Okay. Now let's get started with our footer. So for the footer, we have this section. It's just going to have that same class of section, and I'm actually going to give it that class of background black, and set a style to make sure that the color in all of these is set to white, so that we don't have to worry about setting them for each of the elements. We can just do it like this and make it way easier. Okay. Now, instead of here, I'm going to add a div called footer, and we're going to use this as a sort of grid system. So we're going to set it up as, this is one column, right? And this right here is a column that's slightly smaller, so it's split like this. And there's some spacing between here and between the rows, and that's how we're going to set it up. So in that div, we're going to have an image. And this is going to be our footer logo. It's this thing right here. So that has an appropriate name called footer logo. Then we have this heading. So this is just going to be a heading 2. And this is the text. I'll just paste that in. Okay. And then there's going to be this sort of copyright section with this icon and again this text. So add that as well. So dot copyright. We're going to have our image called footer icon. Okay. And the actual text is, or the actual file is called gumroad icon. And inside of here, we're going to have our paragraph 2. And this paragraph 2 is just going to have this copyright that. Okay. So now if we look, okay, well, the icon is very, very big, but we're going to fix that in a second. So we have that. Then we have these links here and these icons down here. So let's get that to work as well.
So I'm going to have one wrapper sort of for both of these links right here. So this is going to be one set, and this is going to be one set, and then this is going to be its own wrapper. So this is going to be called the footer links wrapper. Let me just add that, footer links wrapper. And inside of here, we're going to house both of our sets of links. So one set and another one. Now, it's going to have a class of link and a class of paragraph 2. Like that. Now it's leading nowhere. I'm just going to paste this a couple of times. University, log, terms of service, and we don't need this next one, privacy policy. Okay, so now I'm just going to copy this one to create our second set of links, like that. And then we're going to create our final footer social. That's going to contain all of our social icons over here. So call it footer social. Now this is just going to be a set of items. So footer social icon. And okay, it doesn't really matter what order we put them in. So okay, so F logo I think is going to name them. There. Okay, so Facebook. I'm just going to pick this a couple times. Instagram, no Pinterest is, and I think it's YouTube, and and then it's Twitter. Okay, so yeah, this looks a little bit weird right now, but again, okay, I think that's all we really need for now, so let's get to work on that. Okay, let's get started. Add this to my sections, so, oh god, okay, something weird is happening, 1 second, there we go, footer, okay, that worked now. And so for our footer itself, like I mentioned before, it's going to have a grid setting, so first I'll just make sure that it has a width of 100%, so it's taking up that whole space, oh god. Way better. I don't know what's going on over there, but trying to fix it. Okay, so footer is going to have a width of 100%, so it's going to take up this entire section. And now let's get to the grid part. So let's display grid, okay? And how it's going to work is it's going to have, so I'm going to set up the template columns. So we're going to have 2 columns. One is going to take up like half of the screen, right? And the other half is going to take up a little bit more than that, or sorry, a little bit less. So yeah, that's how we're going to set this up. And the column gap, so the sort of width between each of these columns, is going to be a little bit more. And then the row gap is going to be less than that. And obviously some padding, because as you get to this section, we don't have the padding, so like this. Okay. Now we just have to get everything into its correct spot. So we're going to grab that footer logo and resize it, so it's going to have a width of maybe 18 VW. So that's VW's viewport width, so it's taking up 18% of the viewport. And then we want to make sure that it's in where we need it to be. So it's going to be maybe from the column 1, it's going to take up the entirety of the first column, and it's going to have a row of that same, the first row. Then for our heading, so footer.heading2, we're going to make sure that it's, again, in that first column, but it's in a in the second row. Okay, now for our links. This one's going to have a little bit more complex styling, and by complex I mean I'm just adding display flex to it, yeah, so that these can sort of be placed next to each other. This is going to take up the second column, and it's also going to be in the second row, like this. Okay, now we can't see any of the links, but if I highlight them, you definitely can.
And that's because the color is not set. So let's set the color for them. Color white. Okay. You should spell it right. Okay. I'll set it on the link itself then. Yeah, okay. Grab that. Okay. Now let's go to our footer links. Now this one is going to be displayed in a column. So let's make sure to mention that. So flex direction column. And then I'm going to have this a width of 50% because again we have 2 sets of this sort of happening. And then we're going to grab the link itself. So footer links, just footer links. And we're going to grab the link itself. So I'm going to hit the A for the A tag. I'm going to change the color. There we go, now we can see them. And I'm also going to give it just a little bit of margin to the bottom. 0.5 EM sounds about right, like that. And then when I hover, I want it to turn this sort of pink color, so let's do that. Okay, so make sure that the color turns to be pink, like that. Okay, now the last thing is to get this copyright set up. This one is also pretty basic. It's just going to have a display flex so that we have these 2 items sort of put next to each other. And then just going to align it to the center so that align content, align items to the center, like that. And then, make sure we set the grid. So this is going to be, again, in the first column, but in the last row. So grid row. Okay, like that. And I'm going to make sure to give that footer icon some margin. Like that. Okay. Now, final thing to do is these icons, and those are also pretty simple. We're going to just grab it, make sure that this is also set to display flex, and align the items to the center, and then just justify the content to be spaced between so that they're spread across this whole thing like that. Then we're just going to move them, so grid column is going to be the second one, and the row is going to be the third, so expand that. And the one thing left to do is just to change the sizes of them to make sure that they're all uniform at all times. So the footer social icon is going to have a width of 1.5. And that works for all of them except for the Facebook icon, because we just need to go back to this one right here and go to style, add a style property, and we're just going to change the width to be auto and set the height instead to have 1.5 AM, like that. Okay. Okay, so that's it for the building of this website so far. Next up, we're going to work on creating this parallax animation that's found across really most of this site, yeah, we'll make the parallax, and then after that, we'll move on to responsive. Now, the part we've all been waiting for, and that is, of course, the parallax animation. Okay, so this is the parallax animation. I'm going to show it to you guys one more time before we actually get into building it. So as you can see here, the sticker moves up. It's really subtle, but you know what's happening and you see it for it, just like that. Okay? Now, that, and as you can see, this sort of continues across lots of different places across the site. Like right there, with all these creator stickers right here. And then, of course, we have these planes, lots of them moving up and down like this. Again, really subtle, but definitely happening, right? And this continues all across the page. Now, this is the parallax animation that we're going to be building today. Now, before we get started with any of the actual sort of building, I want to explain the logic behind this actual sort of parallax animation. And how I'm going to do this is like this, okay? So first, what we're doing is every single element that needs to have a parallax animation sort of appear in them. So for example, this grid right here, right? So if I inspect this
finished demo that I have here, you can see that, let me just make that a little bit bigger, okay. You can see that it has this class of parallax right there, okay? And this parallax class is applied to everything that has any sort of parallax effect going on inside of it, okay? So, for example, this creator right here has a class of parallax. This one also has a class of parallax, and so on with this one, and yeah, on and on. So, essentially what this is doing is, or how it's helping is because a lot of our grids have parallax, right? But a lot of them don't. Like, for example, this one doesn't, and this one doesn't, and like this one doesn't, and so on. And so, for us to be able to select all of the divs with a parallax, with a sort of parallax interaction going on inside of them, we couldn't just select grid have. We would have to have a special sort of class just for us to be able to access that. So that's what we're doing first. We're selecting all the elements with the parallax class, okay? And then what we're doing is we're checking these divs that have this parallax class, right? So we have a div here and all these divs that have the parallax class. And all we're checking is we're checking if these certain divs are in view, okay? So for example, this particular div right now, this hero right here, is in the view, okay? And so this is one where the parallax interaction would currently be occurring. But, for example, if we look at this interaction, if I scroll to there, you won't be able to see, but you just have to believe me. So this particular div, right, even though it has that class of parallax, we're not going to trigger that parallax effect until the user has scrolled to where that div is visible in their screen, okay? And that's another part that's happening. And I'll explain later why we sort of need that part. Now, the next part, after we are looking for what div with that parallax element is in view, is to see all of these sort of stickers inside of it, okay? So, for example, again, this hero div right here has that class of parallax, right? And it also has these stickers. So what we're doing after that is we're grabbing all of these stickers inside of the div that is in view, okay? So, again, just logic, no actual code. What's happening is that we're looking at all of these elements that have the class of parallax. First, we're checking for which one is in view, okay? Then we find the one that's in view, and then we look at all of the sticker elements that are inside of that div that is in view, okay? Now, so these, for example, would be the sticker elements in view, okay? Then, what we're doing is, based on the scroll Y position. Now, the scroll Y property, if I just switch over to the ending picture that I have over here, basically returns the number of pixels that the document is scrolled vertically, okay? And this is helpful to us when building our parallax interaction, because it allows us to create this sort of dynamic movement of the stickers, right? Because when I scroll down, based on that scroll position, this sticker is able to move up, right? And as I scroll up, the sticker is able to move down. And that is only because of my scroll position that it's able to do that. Because if I set, for example, like a set value for it to move, maybe I said that the sticker should move 10 pixels, right? Then regardless of whether or not I scrolled up or down, it would still move down 10 pixels, right? So, for example, if I just set this, so right here, if we sort of inspect this element over here, you can see that through our JavaScript, I have applied this transform translate. It's causing it to move based on my scroll position. So if you observe this sort of Y value right here, you'll see it happening in real time. So as I'm scrolling down, the sticker is moving up. As I'm scrolling up, the sticker is moving down, right? That's based on our scroll position and a couple of other variables I will get to in just a second, okay? So that's how the actual sort of sticker is moving, okay? And really, that's the entire sort of logic behind it. I'll try to explain more in detail as we sort of get into the code, because I'll use more console.logs just to sort of explain everything and test everything before I get things to actually work, because I find that helps me sort of visualize what I want to happen. So let's go. Okay, so I'm displaying home.js right here, and the first thing that we're going to do, like I mentioned before, is we are going to grab all of the elements that have that class of parallax, okay? But right now, we have to modify our HTML a little bit, right? Because none of the divs
actually have parallax yet. So let's go and let's add parallax to the divs that are going to have that parallax animation. So we know that this hero is going to have that, so let me just add that to the class list right here. And let's see, the creator will have it. So like that. This one as well. Okay. Now we need it for the create 3. We definitely need it for the income section. Remember all those coins that are floating. And then I think we need it for the pricing. Let's see. Okay. So these are all the divs that need that parallax sort of class. Okay. So let's go do the first step. And the first step is to sort of capture all of the elements that have this class of parallax. Okay. So I'm going to define a variable called all_parallax. Okay. And I'm going to use document.querySelector all. So this is going to select, it's basically going to give us a list, right? So, yep, I'm going to select the parallax div, so dot for the class, right? Because it's a class name, like that. Okay, now, before we do anything else with this, I always like to console.log to make sure that the sort of things that I'm getting are what I want them to be, right? So again, we're expecting this to be a list of all the divs that have the class of parallax. So let's go and check. Let's go to our page, and let's open up inspect, and let's go to the console, and let's look and see. Okay, so right here we have our node list, and we have, okay, so here's a div, right? We have this one again. Okay, wait, let me click on it. Oh, let's not do that. Okay, so yes, we are returned, so this one right here, this one, okay. So all of these are exactly what we expected them to be, right? A list of all of the divs with the parallax class. So that's working fine, okay? Now, the next thing that we're going to do, and I'm just going to actually just comment out this console.log, okay? And then we're going to move on to the next. So the next part of our program is going to be a sort of function that checks whether or not a div is in view. And for this, I found a function on a Stack Overflow post, and I decided to use this one. And actually, I'll post the link in the description down below, so you guys can check out this sort of answer. But I'm going to use this, and I'm just going to copy and paste it right now into my code. And essentially what this function does is it checks whether or not an element is in view based on sort of grabbing the width and height of it and checking whether or not it's in view. Now, this function right here has a commented out version of one that returns partially visible elements, and we want that to work. So we want, I'm actually going to uncomment this part and just get rid of this part right here, only because what we want to happen is we want this sort of function to return true, even if a little bit of that div is in view, because that's when we want our parallax to start. If it was fully in view, our parallax wouldn't really work, considering we're always scrolling in and out of that div. So yep, use the second part that was commented out, and again, I'll post the link in the description down below so you guys can check it out. Okay, so this is our function, okay? And now, this is pretty much all the prep we're going to need. Now it's time to actually get our sort of scroll trigger to get started. And for that, what I'm going to do now is I am just going to add a event listener, and I'm going to add this event listener on the window, okay? So I'm going to do window.add event listener, and this event listener is going to be for scroll, and when anything, even if it scrolls just a little bit, this event is going to be triggered, and essentially what it's going to do is, let's say function, okay? And just going to close that out. Nothing like that. Okay, perfect. Now in here, what's going to happen is a for loop is going to start. Now, whenever anybody scrolls, this for loop is going to start. And essentially, what this for loop is going to do is it's going to grab this list that comes back from this all parallax, and it's going to go through this list. And what it's going to do is it's going to check if any of the divs in that list are visible right now. Okay? If any sort of div from that list is visible, it will start the sort of set of instructions that make these stickers move. But we'll get to that in a second. Now all we need to do is just set up the part that causes it to go through this parallax list, and it goes through it until it finds that one div that is in view. Okay, so how we're going to do that is we're going to start a for loop.
And again, we can use VS Code to help here. I'm just going to hit enter. There we go. Okay. So we're going to use the same basic setup. I'm just going to leave it mostly the same here. And then change array to say all parallax. Okay. Now what this for loop is doing is it's starting an index, right? And as long as the index is less than the length of the list itself, it's going to keep running this for loop. And then it's going to increment the index by 1 each and every time. Okay, so this is like basic JavaScript stuff. Okay. Now, instead of this for loop, first thing that's going to happen is we are going to make a, we're going to declare a variable. Okay, this variable is going to be called element. Okay, so ln. And what it's going to do is it's going to grab this list that we have right here, and it's going to grab the item at the index of this list. So essentially what it's doing is it's going through this for loop, right? And when the index is 0, so when it's the first item in that list, it's going to set that item to be equal to element. So let's just console.log, okay? So console.log element. Now we should get this console.log, I think maybe 5 or 6 times, because I think that's how many parallaxes there are. But let's go and check that out. Okay, so now we just need to scroll, okay, because otherwise it's not going to be triggered, right? Okay, so when I scroll, what happens is that we get, okay, this is just being duplicated a couple. Let's go back and let's restart, okay? And I'm going to try to scroll just a little bit. Like, okay, that still does it a lot of times, but we don't actually have that many divs. It's just, okay, so yeah. So essentially it's just logging all of the elements as it's going through this for loop, okay? But that's not what we want to happen, right? Obviously, console.log is not what we need. But yes, now we know that at least that part works, right? So now, what we're going to do is our next part is, okay, so it's cycling through the loop, that part is working perfectly. Now, we need to check if this element is in the view. And now that we have this function set up, it's actually really easy to get this to work. So all we need to do is we need to set up an if loop, okay? And what happens is that if is scrolled into view, so that function that we have, and we're just going to pass in our element, okay? So I'm passing in my element, and for right now, all that's going to happen is it's just going to console.log div is, so div is in view. That's all it's going to say. Now let's check that out, okay? So I'm going to console.log div is in view, and then I'm also going to console.log the element itself, because I want to see which div is in view, right? So I'm going to scroll a little bit. Okay, so here we go. It says div is in view, and then it says, it gives us this HTML element, and we know now that it's selecting this div right here, this parallax div. So as I hover over it, you can see that this element is sort of being selected. So now we know that that part is also working, right? So this knows that when we scroll, it checks whether to see if this div is in view, and it's getting it right. Now let's scroll past here, and let's see if we can find another div with that parallax element to make sure that it's still sort of capturing that. Okay? So as you can see now, none of the divs with that parallax class are visible, so nothing new is being logged into that console. So as I keep scrolling, nothing new is being logged into that console, because as we know, our function is working, and we don't actually see a parallax div that is in view. So I keep scrolling, there we go. So now here, when we get into this part, this is where that parallax div sort of comes into view. And then now here, if I sort of hover over any of these divs, right, there's this one right here. So this function is working perfectly. Now the next thing for us to do is to grab all of these stickers. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll back up here. And the next thing for us to do is to sort of grab all of these stickers that are in the particular div that is scrolled into. Okay, so again, I'll sort of comment these out. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to make a sort of variable. I'm going to declare a variable called stickers, and it's going to select all of the stickers that are like in view currently. Okay, so is equal to the element. So essentially what this is doing is it's grabbing the element, and I'm going to do element.querySelectorAll, and then I'm going to grab the .grid sticker. Now, if you remember, all of our stickers have that class of grid sticker, right? So what this is doing is it's grabbing this element that is in view right now, and it's going through the elements inside of this element and grabbing all of the sort of elements. Keep saying elements. Okay, it's basically grabbing all of these stickers that have this class of dot sticker, okay, dot grid sticker. So now if I console.log this, again, console.logging is my best friend, you know, it really helps me figure out what's going on. Okay, so now I'm going to reload, and let's try it one more time. So I'm going to scroll, okay, so it gives us a list, and if I open up this list and I go through here, okay, so this div is in view, and this sticker is in view, and so is this one. So now it's working fine. Now I'm going to switch to get another one. Let's go here, okay. Wow, okay, so here, now again, this sticker is in view. So this is working perfectly. I think this is great. Okay, now let's get started with the next part, and that is actually getting these stickers to move. So how are we going to do that, okay? Now, for that, we're going to use yet another for loop. Okay, so I'm going to make a for loop here, and I'm going to leave everything the same, just change the array to these stickers, because that's going to be our array. Now it's going to cycle through this array, right? And what we want to happen is we want these sort of stickers to move, right? And like I was explaining before, how we're going to get these stickers to move is by using something known as window.scrollY, okay? Now let me try to show you an example without using window.scrollY to really show you what something like 500 pixels would do, for example. 500 pixels is a static value, so let's see what would happen if we did use window.scrollY, okay? So to change the sort of position of this sticker, what I'm going to do is grab the individual sticker. How I'm doing that is by using stickers as index, right? So it's just getting the current sticker in the for loop. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the style. So style is a way for us to be able to access, or change any of the CSS properties. So I'm going to do stickers as index.style, and then we can put any property we want. I'm going to use transform, okay? And what we're going to do is I'm just going to change the transform. I'm going to do translate 3D, and I want the X to be moved 0 pixels. I want the Y to be moved 500 pixels, and I want the Z to be moved 0 pixels, okay? So let's try this and see what happens, okay? Let's reload, okay. Now, even if I scroll, as I scroll, right, that's it. It just falls to the bottom, and you might expect that, okay, so as I was trying this out, I was thinking, okay, maybe if I scroll down, it'll go down 500 pixels. If I scroll back up, it'll go up negative 500 pixels, right? That's how it's supposed to work. Well, that's not how it works. If I reload one more time, it just drops 500 pixels, and that's it, okay? So the only way for us to make this not so static, right, is by using the window.scrollY, and I'll show you how, okay? So let's just actually log the window.scrollY. Let's see what that actually is, okay? Window.scrollY, okay? Let's go through here, okay? So reload, and let's see. Now, as I scroll, you can see this. Let me get rid of any of the console.logs here. Okay, good. Now, as I scroll, you can see that this window.scrollY keeps getting bigger. And essentially, what the window.scrollY is the number of pixels of the document is currently scrolled vertically, okay? So obviously, as we keep scrolling down further, the window.scrollY is going to increase. And if we scroll back up, the window.scrollY decreases, okay? So that's how this is going to sort of help us create that effect of it, you know, moving when we in a direction when we go down, and moving in a different direction when we go up, because it's going to track that scroll Y position, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a variable, I guess, called position, so I'll call it left position, and I'll set that to be equal to the window.scrollY. And let's just see what happens, okay? Let's see what happens if I set this position to be window.scrollY, and then I sort of add that to my statement here. So I'm going to just sort of concatenate that in. So position plus, okay, that should work. Now, if we sort of check it out, okay, let's just see what happens. So as I scroll, it just keeps moving down, okay? Because remember what's happening is we're tracking that scroll position, right? So it's moving down, right? And at one point, it stops moving down. And you know why that's happened? Remember, this whole thing is based on whether or not this element, this div, is visible, right? This sort of parent div is visible. So the moment that the actual parent div goes out of our view, you can see that, just right there, we go out of view, right?
this thing stopped moving. And then as we sort of scroll back up and back into the view of that parent div, it starts moving again. And this is obviously not the effect that we want, right? But it's getting there, right? It's moving in a different direction as we scroll down and a different direction as we scroll up, okay? So that part is working. But now we can't just use window.scrollY. We have to sort of manipulate that window.scrollY to make it a little bit less sort of, I guess, aggressive is a way to describe it. So, because I don't want it to be tracked exactly to the window.scrollY position, I want it to be maybe like 1/4 of it, okay? And you know how we do that? Well, we multiply it by a decimal, okay? So I'm going to take the window.scrollY and I'm going to set position to be multiplied by maybe 0.1, okay? Now let's see what happens. So as I scroll, you can see it's moving down just a little bit. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more visible for now. Maybe I'll do 0.5. Okay, so as you can see, it's moving down, right? And then as I scroll back up, it's moving back up, okay? Now, if we go back to our demo right here, in parallax effects, what's usually happening is that as you scroll down, the elements are moving up, and then as you scroll up, the elements are moving down. And there's a really simple way to achieve that effect, and that is literally just to change that 0.5 to a negative 0.5. So it always does the opposite. So as I scroll down, it's going up, and then as I scroll up, it's going down. Perfect, okay? Now I'm going to reduce the sort of, again, intensity of that. Maybe make it 0.2, okay, negative 0.2. There we go, so it's scrolling up, and then it's scrolling back down. Perfect, okay. Now, because of what we have done so far, it really should be working on all the sections, so let's go see. Let's scroll down here. Is it working with this section right here? Okay, definitely not. And this is a problem that I first faced when I was trying to get this to work. And you guys are also probably very confused. So let me explain just what's going on here. But before I do that, let's go through all of these sort of divs that have that parallax section, okay? So first of all, for some reason, this div is all the way up here in the top, which it very much should not be, right? Then let's scroll down. Okay, so our parallax elements from here are all the way up here. Again, should not be here, right? Let's keep scrolling, let's keep scrolling. Again, these have come up somehow all the way up here. So all of this is very wrong, right? Like, we definitely don't want this to happen. So let's figure out how to fix it, okay? So here's what's happening. What's happening is that all of these divs, right? Again, we are tracked to the window.scrollY position, okay? Now, the farther down you get, right? So like maybe when you get to this section perhaps, right? The window.scrollY is significantly larger than it was when we were up here, right? So obviously multiplying it by something like negative 0.2 is going to have a less intense effect here than it will have all the way down here because again, that window.scrollY position is increasing, right? I'm going to log that one more time to sort of explain what I'm seeing here. Okay. Sorry, window.scrollY. Okay, what's going on? Window.scrollY. Now let's go see, okay? I'm going to reload and start fresh, okay? So I'm going to scroll. Now let's see, you see it's 110, 98. And those might seem like big numbers, but they're really not, right? And then we keep scrolling, still 1,000, still pretty manageable, right? But then we get down to this next section over here, and it's like already at 3,000, and we haven't even entered the full section yet, right? So obviously, the effect with multiplying is that the numbers are going to get a little bit bigger, right? So maybe my first thought when I was doing this was that maybe I should just change that sort of number, right? Maybe I should make it negative 0.1 when it enters the section that's farther down, right? But if we sort of think about this and try to make like a really good scalable website, it isn't really good to be able to have to sort of change that whether it's negative 0.1 or it's negative 0.2 for every single section based on like how far away it is. Like that's not scalable. So I think what I really had to try to figure out was how do I make it so that regardless of whether or not it is all the way up in the front here or like the last parallax section and it's all the way down here, how do I make sure that it has the same effect, right? And okay, here's what I figured out. How I need to make it work is I need to subtract the element offset from the scroll line. Okay, so now you're wondering, okay, what's that, right? So let me explain that as well. Let
going to switch back here, and I am going to keep this scroll Y logged, but I'm going to add some text in front of it so that you know this is the scroll Y, because we're going to be logging two things at the same time. So scroll Y, and I'll just sort of add it like here, and I am going to duplicate this and call this element offset top, offset top, offset top, and then I'm going to actually log the element.offset. Oh, where did that go? .offset top. So now, if we sort of look at that as we're scrolling, okay. So here's the thing. Now, our scroll Y is at 281, and the element.offset top is the space from the element, right? So the element, starting point of that element, to the top of the actual sort of start that web page, that viewport, that sort of start, right? Okay. So now, when we scroll down all the way to here, for example, when we get to this div right here, as you can see, the element.offset top here is to 3,543, right? And our scroll Y is 2,050. Now, this element.offset top really helps because when we subtract this element.offset top from the scroll Y, like I'm going to do over here, what it does is it reduces all of that space to the top, sort of making it seem like every single section is at the front of that page, is at the top of that page, because it's sort of forgiving all of the sections that come sort of before it, right? For example, for this section, right, if we didn't have this navbar right here, it would be like the first foremost section, right? And that gives us this sort of scroll effect that's happening exactly where it needs to happen, right? But this section down here has lots of like sort of content before we get to this section, and that's what's creating the scroll Y to act so weirdly. But if we subtract the sort of content that's above it, right, and make that all the way down to 0 and sort of pretend like this element is at the top, then it allows that scroll animation to work properly. So that's exactly what we're going to do. What I'm going to do is I'll just comment out these console.logs, really. And instead of doing window.scrollY times -0.2, I'm going to do window.scrollY minus the element's offset to the top. Just drop that in parentheses to make sure this goes first, right? And then I'm going to multiply that whole number by -0.2. So now let's go all the way up, let's reload, and let's go to our console, even though it could be there, and let's just see. Okay, so this first page is working well. That's good, right? Now let's keep scrolling down and keep scrolling down. You know, we get to this page right here. Oh my god, this one's working great as well. Let's go to this one, also great. This one right here, doing amazing, perfect. And this one as well. Okay, so I think this is a success. I think this was amazing. And that's how we do it, you know? We just have to subtract this sort of spacing to the top to make it seem like this element comes first, right? Now, there's one more place that we're sort of missing that parallax animation, and that is this income div right here. Now, I think we've already given that div the parallax. Where is that? We've already given it that parallax sort of class, right? But now we need to sort of make it work, not just for grid stickers, because remember, these don't have the class of grid sticker, these have the class of income coin. So this is a really simple adjustment. All we really need to do here is just go to the element.querySelectorAll in the stickers list right here. I'm just going to add a comma and do .income coin as well, and I think that should do it. This comma just separates it. This is one class and this is one class. It's getting elements with both of these classes, right? So, or no, it's getting elements with either of these classes, right? So it can be either a grid sticker or it can be an income coin. And now if we go back and look here, okay, as you can see, obviously these are working fine. Let's go look to our income section. Okay, this one also seems to be moving. Perfect. So that is the parallax animation for this website. Next up, we have to make this thing responsive. The next and final part to creating this website is, of course, to make it responsive. So this is my demo here, and I'm just going to inspect it and go into the mobile mode so that we can check out what it looks like. Just exit out of here. Okay. So let's check out what this looks like. And so this is, I believe, okay. So this is 1024.
This is laptop size. Now this, at this point, it remains pretty much the same, except if you notice here, our sort of gum head loop here turned into a rectangle that now spans the entire page, and that's because it doesn't look as good, I think, when we sort of squeeze that page down, that circle sort of rounded corner where it doesn't work as well. So now it's a rectangle, and then if we just keep scrolling down, things are relatively the same. I mean, not lots have changed. I can see that the font size is a little bit smaller, but not significantly. And this makes sense. I mean, it doesn't look out of place. It looks right about the perfect size, okay? Now, when we get to the next sort of dimension or resolution, that's the tablet. Now, here is where things really start to get a little bit different, okay? So first of all, our grid sort of went from being 2 columns to be 1 column and right on top of each other. So like it's this one and this one. And of course over here we have our navbar, okay? So our responsive navbar that works when we hit this, and then we get this nice little animation here, as well as all of this text over here that all of our links that line up like this instead, okay? And yeah, again, we have our text like this, everything, all our grids are now 1 column each, like this. And I mean, besides that, again, the font size is smaller, as it should be, and otherwise there isn't too much else that's different. Now we go back to our mobile here, and again, it's pretty much the same, just like this. And I think that's perfect, that's exactly how it should be, and that's it. So really, most of our changes are being made at our tablet right here, and they sort of cascade down lower, but a couple changes are being made at 1024 pixels, and then we finally have our navbar at 768. So let's get started doing some of the other stuff. Let's first sort of inspect what's wrong with our page, and then we'll go and sort of get to what we need to fix, okay? So first thing in 1024 is, I think, this sort of gum head here. But before we even do that, the reason that we're using EMs throughout this whole thing for all of our font sizes is so that we can adjust our body. So if I go in here now, and I set the body to have a font size of 14 pixels now, we can see that the font size of all the elements reduces significantly, and that's what we want. We want it to be able to be controlled by one value and not thousands of others that we need to sort of change for every single element. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to make it actually 16 pixels and not 14. I'm going to do, I think, 14 for the tablet mode. But let's go and change that here in our code. Now, how we do that is by using media queries. So media queries are, let me just go back down to the bottom here, and I'll call this a section of the media query. Okay, now this media queries are going to be set up like this. So at media, and as you can see, we already have the emit abbreviation here to help us out. So it's going to say at media screen, and we're going to give it a maximum width of 1024 pixels. So this is basically saying that at 1024 pixels, here's what I want to have, okay? So first thing, at 1024, I want the font size to shrink down to 16 pixels. And the good thing about using media queries is that it cascades down to the lower resolutions, with lower sort of screen dimensions. So for example, 1024, all the styles that I apply here will cascade down to 768, which is tablet mode, and then mobile mode as well. So the sort of sizes go down like that. Okay, so you don't have to maybe change something in 1024 and then maybe copy and paste the same code into 768, so it does that automatically. Okay, so and a prime sort of example of that is this right here, our gum head loop, because if we change it in 1024, it'll just cascade down to tablet and mobile mode as well. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to grab the loop outer, so that's this part. Let me just select it right here, and we're going to, if you notice here, we've given it a max width. We're just going to get rid of that max width. So max width 1. And you can see that it fully stretches to contain that. Now we're going to get rid of that border radius. That's 0, like that. And then what I'm going to do is change the border width. So I'm going to get the border width property, and I'm going to do 2 pixels and then 0 pixels. So basically this is saying that the top and bottom will have a border of 2 pixels, and the left and right will have a border of nothing. So just like that. Perfect. Okay?
now the next thing that we're going to do is reduce the border radius on our loop inner. So border radius 1 round. Like that. So it's just barely sort of round. So we're going to grab the loop row here. I'm just going to make the width a little bit more, so maybe I'll make it 80%. Like that. So there's a little bit more spacing there. Perfect. Now I'm just going to scroll through once, see if there's anything a little bit too big. Okay. And the first thing that I start to notice is our stickers right here. These stickers are extremely big, and they look okay on our laptop sizes here, but I think what I'm going to do is change the sticker sizes altogether. So not just for responsive mode, but for everything. So I'm going to scroll back up, try to find my sticker, and I want to leave this in and not sort of go back and like re-record this area where I left this width, but I think it was sort of important to show you guys how sometimes even after doing the whole thing I sort of have to go back and change things around. Now, I think I'm going to switch it to EMs only because they're a little bit more accommodating. As you can see, like it's easier for them to be sized or sort of change their sizing around. So I'm going to fix that. Okay, so for our grid sticker to the top right, I'm going to make that 8 EM. Okay, let me just scroll back. Okay, so 8 EM. It doesn't make too much of a difference. Oh. Is that working? I can't tell. Okay, it is working. 8 EM, and then I'm going to grab the one to the top left, and this one's going to have a width of 9 EM. We won't see the results yet, but yes, they are there. And then this bottom left is going to have a width of 12 EM, and then the one to the top left is going to have, or sorry, the one to the bottom right is going to have 13 EM. Fixes all of them. Okay, so the parallax still works. Let's check it one more time. Okay, yeah, the stickers are not unnaturally big anymore. Okay, maybe we want to change these two. I don't remember if these are in round. Okay, they are. Let's go change these around as well. So income coin. Oh, I remember. I set them up in the HTML, so let's change those around. Okay, if it's 10 rem, I'll make it 8 EM, and then if it's 13 rem, I'll make it 10 EM. I'm just guessing. We can go back and change these. I'll make this maybe 6 or 7 EM, and then the width for this one can be 9 EM, and this one can be 12 or 11. Let's see. Go back to here, see if that looks good. Okay, yes, this looks pretty good to me. Let's see. This size, also nice. Okay, so that I think completes what we need to do for the laptop mode, or for the 1024. Now I'm going to switch to the tablet mode, and here's where some of our problems start to appear. Okay, so let's go back to our CSS here, and I'll scroll right down. We're going to add another media query, but this time it's going to be for 768 pixels. Now, a lot of our sort of size, or things that we're going to change are going to happen in here. So first things first, let's get this font size. I'll make it 14 pixels. So I'll sort of gradually decrease it. I think we could even go down to 13, to even less than that. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now if we scroll down, let's see, to over 100%. Okay, I feel like this heading 3 is always very big. Let's see. Maybe 2 EM looks better. 1.5, let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna go change that. Yeah, see, things like this always keep happening. I tell myself that I like something, and then when I'm doing a video, I always sort of just change things around. But yeah, I think that looks better. I feel like it was being too big. Okay, yeah. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more, because that sort of leaves us at the same size as the paragraph one. We don't want that. Okay, this is looking better. So let's check this out in
responsive mode for tablet. Now, first of all, ignore the navbar because we will get to designing that in just a second. Because remember, we have to get that responsive kind. You know, this kind. Okay, but we're gonna get to that in a second. Now, just want to make sure that everything else looks good as well. Okay, yep, that looks good. Now, let's just check in with the mobile. Okay, so the only thing that's really messing this mobile up is the navbar. So I'm going to see what's going to happen if I just get rid of it. And that still doesn't look very good. So the reason that's happening is because I forgot something. And that is that we need to change this grid when we get to the tablet mode. We just need to sort of change the grid and make it one column, right? So let's fix that. That's why it's not looking so good. So let's look at 768. Okay. So first thing, I'm going to grab the grid halves, and I'm just going to set grid template columns to be 1fr. So that's just making it one column. So now if we go and check, okay, looking way better. Okay. Now the one problem that I am seeing is that the border right class that we had is still on the border right, and we actually don't even need to change that class. Okay, wait, the navbar's in here. There we go. So we don't even need to change that class. All I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the border right. And I know it says border right, but we can pretend that it says border bottom when we get to the sort of responsive mode. But yeah, just make that black. So now it should work. And also get rid of that border. So we do border 0 and then add that border to the bottom. Like that. Okay, perfect. This looks way better. Okay, yes, I think I like this. Now let's check the mobile and see. Okay, so that's the navbar. Now let's get rid of the navbar and see if we still have that poking out. Okay, yeah, this looks way better. Okay, so let's go back to the tablet mode and let's start designing. So the first thing that happens in our navbar is that we get our sort of navbar we get this this logo right here to pop down, and all this other stuff to just sort of disappear. So how we're going to do that first is, before we even do that actually, I want to set up this sort of menu button. We're not going to get to animating it just yet, but I'll just want to set it up so that we can sort of put them next to each other. So in our navbar, here's what we're going to do. Okay. Here. Okay, so outside of this nav menu, I'm going to place the menu button. Okay? Now inside the menu button, we're going to have the menu icon. And inside the menu icon, we're going to have the menu line. And this one's going to have a class of top. Okay? And then we're going to have another menu line, and then this one's going to have a class of bottom. Like that. So this is our menu button. Okay? So let's go and design it. First thing to do, because we don't want this menu button to be like displayed when we're at a screen size higher than 768 pixels, right? So all we're going to do is we're going to scroll to the part with this navbar, and I'm just going to grab the menu button and just make sure that that's set to display none. And then when we get to our actual thing here, I'll leave a comment because this is going to be a pretty long section, and I'm just going to make sure that here it says menu button and then it says display. I think I'm going to set it to flex. Yes, display flex. Okay, so it's not visible at other times, but it is now. Okay, so let's make sure to sort of design this. So we give it some padding of 1.5 EM. Okay, this is the flex actually. This just needs to be displayed. So display this block, right? And then we're going to get into our menu icon, and this one's going to be displayed flex, and it's going to have a flex direction of column like that. Now let's make our line actually. Make make sure this has a width of 2 rem and a height of 2 pixels, a background color of black. So again, because we're trying to recreate this sort of feel to it, these lines, these bars, this hamburger menu. It's going to have some margin at the top of 4 pixels, and some margin at the bottom, also of 4 pixels. Okay, so let's leave that like that. Okay, you can see them here. Now all we need to do is just get rid of all this other stuff. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm actually going to call this section the menu button, because this is going to take a while considering all that animation, but anyways. So for our navbar itself. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if we sort of look at the structure of our navbar here, we can see that our navbar consists of the logo wrapper and the nav menu. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that this nav menu basically disappears until we obviously press that button. So I'm going to set the navbar to be positioned relatively. Okay, relative. I'm going to display flex, and then I'm going to align items to the center and put all the space between them. Okay, so this is how it should look. Not like that. Okay, so this is what the navbar looks like right now. And that is not how it should look, so let's fix that. This should have a flex direction of row, not column, so it's like this. And then, actually, what should be happening is that this nav menu that we have here should be positioned absolutely, and the width of it should be 100%, so it takes up basically the entirety of this navbar here, okay? And then, we're going to take and this is how I'm going to leave it for now. And actually, what I'm going to do is set the max height to be 0, and also set the overflow to be hidden so this max height property actually works. Okay, and I'll explain more in just a second as to how exactly or why exactly I would do that. But yeah, 1 second for that one. But let's get this logo, this sort of navbar thing to work properly. So I'm going to grab the logo wrapper here, and I'm going to give it a border of 0 and give it some padding of 1.5 like that. Okay, and then I'm going to grab the logo itself and make sure that the height is 2 rem. Okay, now let's switch to making our menu button look the best it possibly can. So for the menu button, we also want to give this some padding. That's just for some reason not visible. We already gave it some padding. Okay, let's see, menu button. Oh, it's because I spelled it wrong. I spelled it menu button instead of button. There. Okay, way better. Now if we look to this, for example, this resolution, you don't see the menu button at all, but when you switch to this one, it switches to this view, which is exactly how we want it to be. Okay, now nothing happens obviously when we click this button, but it will in a second. Okay, so first thing, we actually want to set up a trigger with JavaScript to sort of start this animation. And how we're going to do that is, I'm going to actually set this up right before our parallax. So I'm going to call the comment for this one, call it parallax, right? And then above it, I will add a comment called menu, hamburger menu. Okay? And essentially what's happening here is it's really simple. We don't do too much in JavaScript at all. But all I'm going to do is just grab the menu button. I will grab it using document query selector. And just grab it by its class. Dot menu button. Okay. And then I'm going to grab the navbar, also with the document.query selector. Dot navbar. Okay, like that. And then, really simple, I'm just going to add an event listener on the menu button so that when it is clicked, what happens is this function triggers, and in this function, nothing much really happens. We just sort of toggle this class on the navbar. So we grab the class list, and we're going to toggle the class open. Now what this class does is, how we're going to set this up, we're going to do most of this in CSS. So basically, when we click on this menu button, this class of open is going to be added to the navbar. We can actually see it if we look in the console right here, the inspect menu. So let me just keep the navbar open. Whenever I click it, you can see that the class opened, it's on, and then it closes and then opens, right? So like that. That class is just being toggled on and off depending on how many times I click it. Okay? So that is that part. We can honestly, that's it for our JavaScript. Okay? Now it's time for figuring out our CSS. So what exactly is going to happen when you click on this nav menu button? Okay? So the first thing that's going to happen that I'm going to explain to you is dealing with our nav menu here. Okay? So before I even do it, I just want to explain this one. So here's what's going to happen, or here's what's happening here. When you click on this menu button, first thing that we're going to build is actually this sort of horizontal sort of diagonal thing where the lines turn into this cross. And then what happens when you make these into a cross is that this nav bar, this nav menu right here, opens up because of its height. Okay, so here we have set the max height to be 0, but essentially what we're going to do is we're going to increase that max height so that it's able to grow when you click on it. That's the how we sort of get it to open up. That's how our menu works. But first, let's get these lines sort of turning into that cross, okay? So first, how we're going to do that is by, we're going to create one here. So I'm going to make a comment here, navbar open is what I'm going to call it, okay? So this is everything that's going to happen when the navbar is opened. So for this, we're just going to grab navbar, and then I'm going to use the class opened on it, because it should only happen when it's opened. And I want to get this menu line, okay? And I want to specifically get the one on top, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to translate it in the Y, okay? I'm just going to translate it down 5 pixels. And then I'm going to rotate it with Z to the angle of -45 degrees. Okay? And then I'm going to just copy this and do the same for the bottom, but flipped. So it's going to be -5 pixels and +45 degrees. Like this. And if I click on it, you can see that's the actual one. Never mind. If I click on it here, you can see it's happening. And this is instantaneous. Okay? And so what we do to get it like this, where we actually see it animating, is by using the transition property in CSS. So for that, we're just going to go back to where we first defined our menu line, which is right up here, and we're going to use this, which is this transition statement right here. So I just copied and pasted this. So this is just, I'm going to transition all of them in 0.3 seconds with the sort of ease in of ease in out. So now if I save this and test it out, perfect, that's working. Okay. So we got that first part done. Now there's a lot of steps to this animation. Okay, first let's break this down. So we got this part running, right? Now the next part is this image right here. This logo changes colors, okay? And then the whole navbar gets turned into this black color, okay? And then we have to add a border down to this navbar. These are our buttons, so they also have to get a border. And then our features sort of line up like this. So how do we do this? Well, let's take it step by step, okay? So first thing, okay, I'm gonna add this above, or yeah, I'm gonna add this above here. So I'm gonna do navbar dot. It doesn't really matter. I just like having things a bit organized. But yeah, navbar dot open. First thing, change the background color to the black, right? And then I want to change the border to the bottom of 1 pixel solid white. Okay. So that's creating this sort of effect right here. Alright, so now if I click on it, there it's turning black.
It's not really working so well right now, but it will in just a second. Okay. Now, if you remember, just dissect here, we have this logo default and we have the logo white. So this is where that comes into play. So we're going to grab this navbar opened. So navbar.opened, logo, specifically the default one. We're going to set the display of this one to none, and then we're also going to make the opacity 0. Now I'm going to copy this and make it, for the white one, I'm just going to set the display to be block and the opacity to be 100. Okay? So now, when we do this, let's see. Okay, so that's working. Now, the next part, okay, let's see. Yeah, that is working. Okay. It's happening a little bit instantaneously, but we'll add the transitions at the end. Okay. Now we just need to change the color of our menu lines here. So let's add that. So that navbar.opened.menu line. Okay. And just make sure that the background color turns into the white, like this. Okay. Perfect. That's working. Now, the next part is for our links and our buttons. So they're all going to get a little bit of padding now. So let's add that. So .navbar.open.navlink, comma. So I'm going to add 2 of these actually. Do one for the actual links, and then do one for the buttons themselves. Okay. So I'm going to change the padding to 1.5 EM and 3 EM. Right. Give it some margin of 0, and change the font size. Make it all uniform, a color of white. Okay, now we can't see any of it yet, but we will. Also, in just a second. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. There you go. So here's when we start to see it. So navbar.open.navmenu. This contains all of our links, okay? So we're going to set the display to be flex now. The flex direction should be column reverse. And what that's, the reason I'm doing that is because if you look in our non-responsive mode, the buttons come at the end and then these links come, right? But if we sort of put it in responsive mode and we open up this navbar, the buttons come first and then these sort of links. So to get that effect, it's really simple. With flex block, we just have to hit column reverse. Okay? Then I'm going to make sure that the background color, and actually I've already set that with that. I don't think I need to do that. And I'm also going to give it a border to the top of 1 pixel solid white. And then the final and most important step is to make sure that the max height is increased, because as I was saying before, that's how our animation actually starts. Okay, so that's not what we want, but again, we'll fix that. Okay, so, okay, we're going to change the top a little bit, okay? We're going to use the calculation, or the calculate property of CSS, and we're going to calculate 2rem plus 3en, okay? And here's why I'm calculating this, okay? Okay, so what's happening here is this logo that we set. Remember that we set that to have a height of 2rem, right? And the padding of this navbar is, that should say it somewhere. Yeah, okay, so the padding is 1.5 EM, okay? So by saying 2 EM, by saying 2rem and 3 EM, what I'm doing is, so it's 1.5 EM, right? So that's 1.5 EM at the top, and then it's 1.5 EM at the bottom, so that's 3 EM, right? And then the actual height of the logo itself is 2rem. So we just have to add 2rem plus the 3 EM, giving us that calculation, okay? So it's put here perfectly. Now, all we need to do is make sure that the nav menu has a background color of that black. Otherwise, we can't really see anything. Not white, black, okay? Okay, that doesn't look very nice either. But don't worry, we will fix this, okay? Okay, so go back here, and let's go to our navbar.open, our nav menu right, okay? We're going to make sure that this has a flex direction of column,
and it's aligned to flex start. That's basically the left, right? And then I'm just going to give it a border to the bottom of 1 pixel solid white. And make sure that the snap button all have a background color of black, otherwise they will be weird as well. Nope, of black. Like that, okay. Now, let's check and see why that's being sort of covered up. Okay, now let's fix our one to the left, so that's the navbar dot opened dot nav menu left. This is going to be set to a flex direction column and also aligned to the flex start. I don't know why the color changed. Things are being really good right now. Okay. Let me see if I'm missing something. Okay, I think I'm just going to get rid of this navbar, this nav link class from here, and just save it for this button. Let's see. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Now I'm going to grab the actual navbar dot open dot nav paragraph 2, okay, and give this a background color or a pattern actually. 1.5 dm. Yep, okay, so I think the mistake that we made was in our HTML, so I'm going to go back and fix a little bit of this. Okay, so I'm going to get a nav link, and then I'm going to go back to our nav menu here, and the structure really should be a.link.navlink, and then the paragraph element should be inside of the link, not the paragraph, not the link inside the paragraph. So see features, and then I'm just going to delete this and just copy and paste it. Pricing, and then trying to remember some of this stuff. University, login discovery. This should look better now. There we go. Okay, yeah, that looks way better. Yeah, okay. I think this button might have a border. Okay. There we go. Now the next thing that we want to do is make sure that our navbar is always above any of our other elements. So to do that, just make sure that the sort of PC index for the opened navbar is like 1,000, like that. So it's always been covering anything else. Now let's add that transition that I was talking about. Oh, that's not transition. All 0.3 seconds. Is in out. Let's try. Okay, so the background color changed. Okay. Now the next thing that needs to change is our nav menu, because as you can see, that one is sort of animating in, right? We need it to animate in, right? And how we are going to do that is again by using the transition. So nav menu, where did that go? Right here. Just add this and make sure it says max height instead of all. Okay. There we go. Okay, so for anybody that might know how to fix this really specific issue is when I make this navbar, right?
or when I made this navbar. It was pretty good, but one problem that I'm facing is that when I hit close, it sort of lingers for a second there before disappearing. Let me just increase the timing of the animation so you can see what's happening. So it comes out fine, right? But then when I hit close, this navbar sort of lingers here for a moment before hiding. So if anybody knows how to fix it, why it's happening, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave me a comment in the comments down below, and I'll check it out and try to fix it. But yeah, that's just something that I've been trying to fix, and I really couldn't figure out how to do it. So yeah, it'd be really helpful if you guys would know anything about that. Okay, so that's it for the nav bar. I don't believe there's anything else that you need responsive, but it's obviously always good to give one last final check. So I'm going to look through here, and the web mobile. Okay, perfect. There. I'm going to go back to 0.3 seconds. Oh, okay. 3.3, like that. Okay. Well, that's it for the responsive part of this website. Yeah. Okay, that's it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for sticking around this long. And let me know how you like this new style of content. Leave me a comment down below, like the video, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram. I'll see you guys next time. Bye!